So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel, and today we are gonna see what if Harry Potter and Wednesday had a marriage bond, a forceful marriage bond. It can be a little bit harem, and this will be the crossover between Harry Potter and Wednesday. So if you're new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe and like the video. Also press that bell notification to all, so whenever I post video you get the notification first. So yeah, now without any further delay, let's get straight to the video.
A death at the altar. The stone had been sitting in Nevermore Academy's vault for 200 years, and in all that time, nobody had bothered to check if it was alive. Wednesday Addams noticed it first. Not because she was looking, she rarely needed to look for trouble. Trouble had excellent taste in finding her, but because the thing hummed. A low, subaudible vibration that crawled up through the floorboards of the Arcane Studies lecture hall and settled in her molars like a toothache with ambition. She was seated in her usual spot, third row, far left, where the shadows were deepest, and the angle allowed her to observe every exit simultaneously. Old habit, useful habit, the kind of habit that kept Addamses alive through centuries of people trying to make them not alive. Professor Aldrich Blackwood stood at the front of the hall, and Wednesday would admit privately, and only under threat of something she actually found threatening, which was a short list, that the man could command a room. Tall, angular, silver threading through dark hair that he wore slightly too long for a man his age, which meant he was either vain or calculated. Wednesday suspected both. The obsidian covenant stone, Blackwood said, gesturing to the object on the demonstration table with the reverence of a man introducing his firstborn, was recovered from a collapsed temple in the Carpathian Mountains in 1823. It was donated to Nevermore by the Bathory family, yes, those Bathories, and has been classified as a Class 3 dormant artifact ever since. He paused for effect. Wednesday noted that he was good at pauses. Tonight, as I'm sure you're all aware, marks the convergence of the sable equinox, a celestial alignment that occurs once every 213 years. The last convergence predates the stone's arrival at Nevermore, which means tonight, for the first time since its recovery, we will observe what happens when the stone is exposed to the alignment's energy. Enid Sinclair, seated next to Wednesday because Enid had the survival instincts of a golden retriever puppy, leaned over. Is it just me, or does he sound way too excited about this? It's not just you, Wednesday said. He's been building to this all semester. Every lecture on bonding magic, every reading on covenant artifacts, breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs to what? That's what I intend to find out. The lecture hall was full. Not just Blackwood's advanced arcane studies students, half the school had turned up. Principal Weems had authorized the demonstration as an educational event, which meant she'd lost whatever political battle she'd fought to prevent it. Wednesday had seen the tension in Weems' jaw at dinner. The woman was worried, and Weems didn't worry without reason. Wednesday scanned the room. The usual faces. Bianca Barclay and her siren contingent near the front, because Bianca always needed to be near the front. Ajax Petropoulos trying to stay awake. Yoko Tanaka with her parasol folded beside her, even indoors, because vampires were nothing if not prepared. Kent and Davina whispering to each other. Thing, who had insisted on attending, perched on Wednesday's shoulder like the world's most disturbing parrot. And in the back row, alone, the transfer student. Harry Potter had arrived at Nevermore 3 weeks ago with a single trunk, no entourage, and a reputation that walked into rooms 5 minutes before he did. Wednesday had done her research within the first hour. The boy who lived. The chosen one. Defeater of Voldemort, the most famous wizard in the European magical world. He didn't look famous. He looked like someone who'd been famous long enough to find it exhausting. Dark hair that defied gravity in a way that suggested it had simply stopped caring about social conventions. Green eyes behind round glasses, and Wednesday had noticed, because noticing things was what kept her breathing, that the glasses were a choice, not a necessity. She'd seen him read small text across a room. The glasses were armor, a way to look harmless. Wednesday respected the strategy even as she saw through it. There was nothing harmless about Harry Potter. She'd watched him in the training yard last week, dueling Blackwood in a demonstration match. He'd moved like water, like violence was a language he'd learned so young it had become his mother tongue. He'd held back, obviously, irritatingly, but even held back, he'd nearly put Blackwood through a wall. He interested her. She hated that he interested her. Interesting people were complications, and Wednesday preferred her complications to be the kind she created, not the kind that showed up with lightning bolt scars and haunted eyes. Right now, those eyes were fixed on the stone, not with excitement, not with curiosity, with recognition. Wednesday filed that away. Blackwood was still talking. The man could talk. She'd give him that, and she'd give him very little else, explaining the theoretical framework of covenant magic, how ancient artifacts could serve as conduits for binding rituals, how the sable equinox amplified latent magical resonance. Wednesday already knew all of this. She'd read his source material and then read the sources his sources had missed. Now, Blackwood said, pulling the velvet cover from the stone with a magician's flourish, let us observe. The obsidian covenant stone was the size of a human heart. Appropriate, Wednesday thought, given what it apparently did. It was black, but not the flat black of painted metal, the deep, liquid black of a pupil dilating in darkness. And carved into its surface were symbols that seemed to shift when you weren't looking at them directly, like words in a dream you could almost read. Blackwood placed it in the center of a silver observation circle etched into the demonstration table. The circle was supposed to contain whatever energy the stone released. Wednesday noted the etchings were slightly asymmetrical, sloppy work for a man who was otherwise precise about everything, or deliberate. She sat forward. The equinox alignment will reach its apex in approximately 4 minutes, Blackwood said, checking an instrument on his wrist that looked like a watch had been crossbred with an astrolabe. I expect we'll see a moderate luminescent response, perhaps some ambient magical fluctuation. Nothing dangerous, but please do stay in your seats. The hum in Wednesday's teeth intensified. She felt Thing's fingers tighten on her shoulder. Something's wrong, she murmured. Enid looked at her. Wrong how? Wednesday wrong where the wrong thing is actually something cool, or actually wrong. The second one. Wednesday stood up. Several heads turned. She ignored them. She was excellent at ignoring things that didn't matter and walked down the aisle toward the demonstration table. Miss Addams, Blackwood said, his tone carefully calibrated between amusement and authority, I did ask everyone to remain seated. You did. I chose not to. The containment circle is flawed. Something shifted in Blackwood's expression. Fast. A flash of something behind the pleasant mask. I assure you I've checked the third sigil in the eastern arc is rotated 11 degrees. That's not a containment configuration. It's a channeling configuration. You're not observing the stone's energy. You're directing it. The room went very quiet. Blackwood stared at her. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a man recalculating. Miss Addams, your eye for detail is, as always, remarkable. But I think you'll find that the distinction between containment and channeling is largely academic in this. No, said a voice from the back of the room. She's right. Harry Potter was on his feet. He wasn't walking toward the front. He was already moving, already in motion, as if he'd been waiting for someone to say what Wednesday had said so he could stop pretending to be a passive observer. That's a focus array, Harry said, and his voice was calm in the way that still water was calm. You couldn't see what was underneath. I've seen them before. Whoever designed that circle wanted the stone's energy to go somewhere specific. He looked at Blackwood. Where? The 2 minutes of silence that followed contained more drama than most theatrical productions Wednesday had attended, and she'd attended several, mostly for the death scenes. Then the stone pulsed. It wasn't light exactly. It was more like the room inhaled and the stone was the lung. Every shadow in the lecture hall stretched toward it. The candles guttered. Something that was either electricity or magic, or both, crackled across the surface of the demonstration table. Blackwood stepped back. The action was so small that most people in the room would have missed it, but Wednesday caught it and understood it perfectly. He'd stepped back because he'd known to step back, because he knew what was coming. Everyone out, Wednesday said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice carried the way a scalpel carried precisely and into soft places. The room erupted. Students scrambling for exits, chairs scraping, Enid grabbing for Wednesday's arm. But Wednesday was moving forward, not back, because the stone was doing something and she needed to see it, needed to understand it, and because Wednesday Addams did not run from things. Things ran from her. Harry was moving forward too. They reached the demonstration table at the same time from opposite sides, and for a half-second their eyes met across the pulsing black artifact, and Wednesday saw in his face the same thing she felt in her own chest, not fear, but the grim recognition of someone who knew they were about to be in the middle of something terrible and had made peace with that a long time ago. The stone cracked open. Not physically, it remained whole on the table. But something inside it split, like an egg hatching, and what came out was a wave of energy so dense that Wednesday could taste it. It tasted like iron and ozone and something older, something that had been waiting in the dark for 213 years with the patience of a predator that knew its prey would eventually come to it. The energy hit Wednesday in the chest. It hit Harry in the chest, and then it connected them. She felt it like a hook behind her sternum, a physical yank that drove the air from her lungs. Across the table, Harry staggered, one hand slamming down on the wood for support, and she saw his eyes go wide, not with pain but with the shock of sudden, involuntary intimacy. Because she could feel him, not his thoughts not yet, but his presence, the weight of him in her awareness like a second heartbeat that had started without permission. Black light, there was no other way to describe it, light that was somehow dark, erupted from the stone and wrapped around them both. It moved like smoke, like vines, like something alive and deliberate. It crawled up Wednesday's arms and she let it, because fighting it would be pointless, and because she wanted to understand what it was doing. She watched it etch symbols into the air around her wrists, the same shifting symbols from the stone's surface, and she watched matching symbols appear around Harry's. The room was almost empty now. Blackwood stood by the door and Wednesday caught his face in the strobing dark light, and what she saw there confirmed everything she'd suspected. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't scared. He was fascinated. The energy tightened. The symbols burned. And then with a sound like a bell struck once in an empty cathedral, it was done. Wednesday stood perfectly still. The stone sat inert on the table, dead and dark, just a rock now, whatever had lived inside it spent and gone, and inside them instead. The lecture hall was a mess, overturned chairs, scattered papers, one of the wall sconces hanging by a wire, but Wednesday barely registered any of it because she was focused on the thing that was now living in her chest, the tether she could feel stretching across the table to the boy on the other side. Harry straightened up slowly. He took his hand off the table. He looked at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Wednesday said. "Are you?" "Number good. Then we can focus on the important thing, which is that I'm going to find out exactly what just happened, and then I'm going to make someone pay for it." Harry almost smiled. Almost. It got about halfway there before the reality of the situation caught up with it. "Agreed, but I think I already know what happened." He held up his right hand. Faint lines glowed on his wrist, fading slowly like embers cooling. "I've read about these, covenant bonds, unbreakable magical contracts tied to ancient artifacts." He met her eyes. "Marriage bonds." The word landed in the silent room like a body hitting the floor. Wednesday looked at her own wrist. The same fading lines. She felt the bond humming between them, warm and persistent, a living thing that had attached itself to both of them without asking and apparently had no intention of letting go. "Marriage," she repeated, tasting the word like poison she was identifying by flavor. "The unbreakable kind," Harry said. "I've seen one reference to these. A restricted section book at Hogwarts. The bond demands proximity, cooperation, and eventual emotional resonance. If it doesn't get what it wants, it kills the bonded pair," Wednesday finished. "I've read the same book. I broke into Blackwood's office and found his copy 3 weeks ago." Harry blinked. Then he did smile, just barely, just a fraction. "You broke into his office." "I break into everyone's office. It's a hobby." She turned toward the door. Blackwood was gone. Of course he was. "He planned this." "Yeah," Harry said. "I know. You knew before tonight. I suspected. The focus array confirmed it. He practically gift-trapped us." Wednesday's eyes narrowed. She was not accustomed to being someone else's experiment. The last person who had tried to use her as a pawn was currently residing in a facility with very soft walls, and Wednesday still sent him a card every Christmas because she believed in maintaining relationships with the people she destroyed. "We need to establish the bond's parameters," she said. "How close, how cooperative, how honest. Right now, right now. Before Blackwood comes back with whatever Plan B looks like, and before the school administration decides to get involved, and before either of us does something dramatic." Harry ran a hand through his hair. The gesture was so casual, so utterly mundane in the aftermath of what had just happened, that Wednesday found it almost offensive. "All right," he said. "Do you want to start with the proximity thing? Because I can already feel it pulling, and I'd rather figure out the radius now than find out the hard way at 3 in the morning." Wednesday considered this. The bond pulsed gently in her chest, a warm, steady pressure that seemed content with their current distance, about 6 feet across the ruined demonstration table. "Walk backward," she said. "Slowly, I'll tell you when I feel it." Harry walked backward, 10 feet, 20. At 30, Wednesday felt a tug, like a hand gently pulling on the hook in her sternum. At 40, the pull became insistent. At 50, pain bloomed sharp, bright, impossible to ignore, like a wire being tightened around her ribs. "Stop," she said, and was irritated that the word came out slightly breathless. Harry had stopped already. His hand was on his chest. 50 feet, give or take." 50 feet, Wednesday confirmed. "In a school with dormitories on opposite sides of the building." "That's going to be a problem. That's going to be one of approximately 47 problems. I've already started a list." They stood in the wrecked lecture hall and looked at each other, really looked, for the first time since the bond had snapped into place. Wednesday studied him with the same attention she gave crime scenes and poison indexes. Up close, Harry Potter was not what his reputation suggested. The legends painted him as golden, heroic, chosen. What she saw was sharper. The scar on his forehead, yes, but also smaller scars. One on the back of his hand that said, "I must not tell lies," in faded white. And she recognized the signature of a blood quill and stored that piece of information in the vault where she kept things that made her want to hurt people. Lean muscle under his uniform, built for speed and violence, not show. And those eyes, green as killing curses. She noted the irony with professional appreciation, watching her with an intelligence that matched her own. "Wednesday Addams," she said, because she believed in proper introductions even under duress. "Harry Potter, but you already knew that. I know most things. The things I don't know I find out, usually by methods that would make your aurors uncomfortable. I don't have aurors, not anymore." Something dark crossed his face. "That's a long story. We appear to have time, approximately the rest of our lives if the bond literature is accurate. You're taking this remarkably well. I process externally through sarcasm and violence. The processing is happening, you just can't see it." She turned on her heel and walked toward the door. "Come, we need to speak with Principal Weems before Blackwood controls the narrative." Harry fell into step beside her. The bond hummed happily at their proximity, and Wednesday despised it for that small, warm contentment, because it wasn't hers and she hadn't chosen it, and Wednesday Addams did not do contentment. The hallways of Nevermore were chaos. Students clustered in groups, whispering, staring as Wednesday and Harry passed. Word traveled fast at a school for outcasts. Wednesday supposed they were all intimately familiar with being the subject of gossip, and therefore excellent at producing it. "Addams." Bianca Barclay stepped into their path. Because Bianca had never encountered a situation she didn't think she could improve with her presence. Her siren features were set in an expression of calculated concern. What the hell happened in there? "A forced magical marriage bond via ancient artifact manipulation," Wednesday said without slowing down. "I'll send a memo." Bianca kept pace. Her eyes flicked to Harry. "And you're Harry Potter." "So I'm told." "The Harry Potter who dueled Voldemort, among other things. And now you're magically married to Wednesday Addams." Bianca's mouth twitched. It was hard to tell if she was horrified or entertained. The universe has a sense of humor. The universe has nothing to do with it, Wednesday said. Someone did this deliberately. I intend to find them. You mean Blackwood? Wednesday stopped walking. She turned to Bianca, and something in her expression made the siren take a half step back, which was notable because sirens didn't scare easily. What do you know? Bianca folded her arms. I know he's been obsessed with that stone since before I enrolled. I know he pulled strings to get the demonstration approved over Weem's objections. And I know he specifically arranged the seating to put you and Potter on opposite sides of the focus array. He didn't arrange my seating, Wednesday said. I always sit in the same place. Exactly. He didn't need to arrange yours. He just needed to make sure Potter was in the right spot. Check the roster. Potter was assigned back row center, right in the array's secondary focal point. Wednesday looked at Harry. Harry looked at Wednesday. Something passed between them, not through the bond, but through the simple, human mechanism of two intelligent people reaching the same conclusion simultaneously. Thank you, Bianca, Wednesday said, and meant it, which she communicated by not insulting Bianca in the same breath, and Bianca was perceptive enough to recognize the courtesy for what it was. They kept moving. Weem's office was on the 3rd floor, and Wednesday took the stairs at a pace that most people would have called aggressive, but she called efficient. Harry matched her step for step, and she noticed that he moved quietly for someone his size, heel-toe, weight balanced, the gait of someone trained in environments where being heard meant being killed. You walk like a soldier, she said. You walk like an assassin, he replied. Thank you. The door to Principal Weem's office was open, which was unusual, and the voices inside were raised, which was more unusual. Wednesday didn't knock. She considered knocking a form of asking permission, and she didn't ask permission and walked in with Harry half a step behind. Larissa Weem stood behind her desk, tall and immaculate and visibly furious in the restrained way that made her more intimidating, not less. Across from her, Blackwood sat in one of the visitors' chairs with his legs crossed and an expression of mild academic interest, as if they were discussing a particularly engaging journal article, and not the fact that he'd just forcibly married 2 of his students to each other. Miss Addams, Mr. Potter. Weem's voice was controlled, tight. I was about to send for you. No need, we're efficient. Wednesday positioned herself directly in front of Blackwood's chair and looked down at him. You targeted us specifically. You modified the containment circle into a focus array. You arranged the seating to place us both within the stone's activation radius. You knew exactly what the Sable Equinox would do to the Obsidian Covenant stone because you've been studying it for 20 years, and you engineered every element of tonight to ensure that Harry and I would be bonded. She said all of this in the same tone she used to order coffee. Flat, precise, without a trace of emotion because emotion was a weapon and she chose when to deploy it. Blackwood regarded her with something that looked unpleasantly like pride. You're extraordinary, Miss Addams, truly. The speed at which you don't flatter me. It insults us both. Answer the accusation. Blackwood uncrossed his legs, recrossed them. His silver rings caught the lamplight. I won't insult your intelligence with a denial. Yes, I engineered the demonstration to activate the stone's bonding properties. Yes. I selected you and Mr. Potter as the optimal subjects. The room temperature dropped. That might have been Wednesday's anger. It might have been Harry's magic. It was probably both. Why? Harry's voice was quiet. Wednesday was learning that Harry Potter's voice got quieter the more dangerous the situation became. She respected this approach. Because you 2 are the most magically potent students to walk these halls in a century, Blackwood said, and he leaned forward, and his eyes were bright with the terrible sincerity of a man who believed absolutely in what he was doing. Wednesday, your psychic abilities are unmatched. Your visions, your connection to the dead, your capacity for magical perception. And Harry, don't take this the wrong way, but you might be the most powerful wizard alive. What the killing curse did to you, what you survived, what it left behind, you're not just a wizard. You're a nexus of magical energy. Get to the point, Wednesday said. The covenant bond doesn't just bind, it amplifies. It takes 2 powerful sources and creates a resonance between them that generates energy neither could produce alone. a unique magical frequency. And that frequency, he paused, not for dramatic effect this time, for reverence. That frequency can open doors that have been closed for millennia. Doors to what? Harry asked. To the source, the wellspring, the dimension from which all magic originates. Blackwood stood. He was taller than both of them and he used it, but neither Wednesday nor Harry shifted an inch. Imagine it, a direct conduit to pure magical energy, the diseases we could cure, the barriers we could break, the knowledge, the power you could hoard, Wednesday cut in. Let's not dress ambition in altruism, Professor. It's unbecoming. You think this is about personal power? Blackwood shook his head. I've dedicated my life. You've dedicated your life to forcing two students into an irreversible magical marriage bond so you could use them as a battery, Harry said, and there it was, the anger. Not loud, not explosive, cold and dense like a star collapsing. The windows rattled. One of the picture frames on Weems' wall cracked. Magic rolled off Harry like heat shimmer off asphalt, visible, tangible, and the bond in Wednesday's chest responded to it, amplifying it, feeding it, and she felt her own power surge in answer. Her vision went black. Not blindness. Vision. Her psychic sight activated with a force it had never had before, like someone had ripped open a curtain she hadn't known was closed. She saw the room in layers, the present, the past, the futures fanning out like a hand of cards. She saw Blackwood planning, months of planning. She saw him corresponding with someone, letters coded, a woman's handwriting, sharp and elegant. She saw a device, half-built, humming with stolen energy. She saw Nevermore burning. She gasped and came back. Harry's hand was on her arm. He'd caught her when she swayed, instinct or the bond. It didn't matter, and she could feel his concern pulsing through the connection between them, and she hated it and was grateful for it in exactly equal measure. Wednesday? Enid's voice. Her roommate, former roommate, she supposed, given the proximity requirements, had apparently followed them and was standing in the doorway with wide eyes and claws half extended. I'm fine. Wednesday straightened, shrugging off Harry's hand. She looked at Blackwood with new eyes. You have a partner, a woman. You've been corresponding with her for months about the bond, and you're building something, a device. Blackwood's mask cracked, just a fraction, just enough. How did you? The bond amplified my abilities, exactly as you predicted. Congratulations, Professor. Your experiment is working perfectly. I hope you're prepared for the consequences because I can now see every secret in this building, and I've just decided that yours are the ones I'm going to excavate first. She turned to Weems. The bond is irreversible. I've confirmed this through my own research, and the vision I just had confirms it further. Harry and I are bound. The proximity requirement is approximately 50 feet. You'll need shared quarters. I assume the East Tower suite is available. It's isolated enough to afford us privacy and central enough to reach all classes. Weems blinked. Wednesday, the situation is that your arcane studies professor deliberately assaulted two students with an ancient artifact, and that you will either provide us with accommodations that allow us to function, or we will arrange our own, and you will not enjoy the way I arrange things. Weems looked at her for a long moment. Then at Harry, then at Blackwood with an expression that promised a reckoning. The East Tower suite will be prepared within the hour. Professor Blackwood, you are suspended from teaching duties pending a full investigation. You will not leave campus. Blackwood stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. He paused beside Wednesday. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry about the method, but you'll understand eventually. When you see what the bond can do, what you two can do together, you'll understand why I had to. No, Wednesday said. I won't. Because understanding would require me to accept that the ends justify the means, and I only accept that principle when I'm the one choosing the means. Get out of my sight. Blackwood left. The door closed behind him. The silence that followed was the kind that fills rooms after explosions, stunned, ringing, full of debris. Well, Harry said, this is going to be interesting. Wednesday looked at him. The bond pulsed between them, warm and insistent and entirely unwelcome. Interesting is what happens to other people. What happens to us is going to be something else entirely. The East Tower suite was larger than Wednesday expected and less grim than she'd hoped. 2 bedrooms separated by a common area, a bathroom that was regrettably tasteful, and windows that overlooked the quad from a height that Wednesday noted would be fatal for anyone who fell from them, which she found reassuring. Thing had already claimed a spot on the mantelpiece by the time they arrived. He waved at Harry with an enthusiasm that Wednesday found borderline treasonous. "Your hand," Harry said, staring at Thing. "It's just a hand. His name is Thing, he's family. If you harm him, I will destroy you in ways that will become the subject of academic papers." "I wasn't going to harm him. I was going to say hello." Harry raised a hand and gave Thing a small wave. Thing waved back so hard he nearly fell off the mantelpiece. "He likes you," Wednesday observed. "His taste has always been questionable." Harry set his trunk against the wall of the bedroom on the left. They'd silently agreed on rooms without discussion, Wednesday taking the right because it had the better sightlines, Harry taking the left because it was closer to the door. Both tactical choices. Both understood without words. "We should talk about this," Harry said, dropping onto the common room couch with the loose-limbed ease of someone who'd spent significant time sleeping in uncomfortable places and appreciated furniture on a deep level. "We are talking. I mean really talk, rules, boundaries, expectations. Because we're apparently going to be living in each other's pockets for the foreseeable future, and I'd rather establish terms now than fight about them later." Wednesday sat in the armchair across from him. She sat the way she always sat, straight-backed, feet flat, hands on the armrests, like a queen on a very small throne. "Fine, I'll go first. I don't do small talk. I don't perform happiness. I have a strict policy against being told to smile. I conduct experiments that occasionally produce smoke, screams, or minor explosions, and I expect these to go unremarked upon. I write between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m., and I am not to be disturbed during this time. I have a cello. I play it when the mood strikes. The mood is usually dark. I maintain a network of informants throughout the school and occasionally receive visitors at odd hours. These visits are not to be questioned. I am investigating a minimum of 3 potential crimes at any given time. I am always armed." She paused. "Your turn." Harry had listened to all of this with an expression that started at mild surprise, traveled through amusement, and settled somewhere in the neighborhood of genuine respect. "I have nightmares," he said. "Loud ones. I've put silencing charms on my room in every place I've slept since I was 14, and they don't always hold. If you hear screaming, it's not an attack. Probably, I also don't do small talk. I don't want to be anyone's hero, symbol, or political asset. I came to Nevermore to disappear, which has clearly worked out brilliantly. I can cook. I actually enjoy it, so I'll handle any kitchen-related tasks if you're interested. I have an invisibility cloak and a map that shouldn't exist, and I'll share both if you ask and the reason is good enough. I don't trust authority figures. I have a tendency to walk into traps knowingly because I'm confident I'll walk out, and I'm not afraid of you." The last statement hung in the air. "That's either very brave or very stupid," Wednesday said. "Most things I do are both." Wednesday felt something unfamiliar. It took her a moment to identify it because she so rarely experienced it. It was the feeling of being seen clearly by someone who was not afraid of what they saw. She didn't like it. She also didn't want it to stop. "The bond is a problem," she said, steering back to practical matters because practical matters didn't make her chest feel strange. "Not the bond itself. That's done, irreversible, and I refuse to waste energy on impossible tasks, but the people who will try to use it. Blackwood is one. There will be others. The wizarding world will find out," Harry said, and his voice had gone flat in a way that told Wednesday this was a subject that hurt. "The British Ministry, the European Confederation, they'll see this as an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Harry leaned back, looked at the ceiling. "I left Britain because the ministry was using my name, my existence, to pass laws I never agreed to, surveillance regulations, outcast registration acts, Potter-endorsed security measures." He said the last phrase with a bitterness that had been composting for years. "I killed a Dark Lord for them, and they turned me into a rubber stamp." When I pushed back, they tried to declare me mentally unfit. The chosen one, they said, was suffering from post-war trauma and couldn't be trusted to make his own decisions. So you left. So I left, came here. Nevermore doesn't answer to the ministry. Outcast territory, outcast rules. I thought I could just be a student. Learn things I'd never had time to learn because I was too busy not dying. He laughed, and it was a short, sharp sound. 3 weeks. I made it 3 weeks. Wednesday processed this. The political implications were significant. Harry Potter, bound in magical marriage to an Addams, one of the oldest and most feared outcast families. The pure-blood supremacists would see it as contamination. The progressives would see it as a symbol. The politicians would see it as leverage. Everyone would see what they wanted to see, and none of them would see two people who had not chosen this. My family will need to be informed, Wednesday said. My mother will be delighted. My father will want to test you. My brother will want to meet you. My Uncle Fester will want to blow something up in celebration. None of this will be pleasant for you, and I won't apologize for any of them. I've faced Voldemort. You haven't faced my mother planning a wedding she didn't get to throw. Voldemort would be a mercy. The ghost of a real smile crossed Harry's face. I'm starting to think you might be the most dangerous person I've ever met. Starting to think, Wednesday arched an eyebrow. I would have expected that conclusion much sooner. Perhaps your reputation is exaggerated. Harry pointed at her. See, you just insulted me and I felt the bond pulse like it was happy. The bond is a parasite with good taste. It liked the insult. It liked the honesty, which tells us something about how it works. It doesn't want affection, it wants authenticity. Harry sat up straighter. His eyes sharpened. She could see him thinking, and she recognized the pattern, the same rapid, lateral processing she did, making connections between disparate pieces of information. That's important. The literature says emotional resonance, and everyone assumes that means love. But what if it just means truth, being genuine? Then we have an advantage. Because I have never been anything other than genuine in my life, and I suspect you stopped being anything else the day you walked away from the ministry. They looked at each other across the common room. Outside, the sable equinox was fading, the strange alignment of stars that had made all of this possible sliding back toward normality. The stone was dead. The bond was alive. And two of the most powerful and stubborn people in the magical world were sitting 6 feet apart, trying to figure out how to share their lives without killing each other or anyone who got in their way. One more thing, Wednesday said. She stood, walked to the window. The quad below was dark and empty. Before the vision ended, before Blackwood pulled me out of it, I saw something. What? Nevermore, burning. She turned to face him, and her dark eyes held the flame of a future she intended to prevent. Someone is going to attack this school. I don't know when, I don't know who, but I saw it clearly, and my visions don't lie. Harry stood too. He moved to the window beside her, and they looked out at the dark campus together. The bond hummed between them, steady and strong, and Wednesday felt his resolve the way she felt his heartbeat, a presence in her chest that was not hers but was undeniably there. Then we stop it, Harry said, simply, without drama, as if preventing catastrophe was just something you did before breakfast. We stop it, Wednesday agreed. But first we find out who Blackwood's partner is. The woman in the letters, she's the piece I can't see yet. Any leads? Not yet, but I will have them by morning. I don't sleep much. Neither do I. They stood at the window in comfortable silence. Or what passed for comfortable between two people who had been strangers an hour ago, and were now bound by ancient magic and mutual determination. Thing crept across the floor and settled between their feet because Thing understood the value of being close to dangerous people who cared about you, even if they expressed that care through insults and threats. Below them, in the shadows of the quad, a figure moved, quick, purposeful, heading toward the east gate. Wednesday tracked the figure with her eyes, tall, silver at the temples. Blackwood, she said. He's leaving campus. Weems told him not to. Should we stop him? Wednesday watched the figure slip through the gate and into the darkness beyond. Number let him run to his partner. Let him report what happened. Let them think they're ahead. And then we remind them what happens when you try to control an Addams and a Potter. She pulled the curtain closed. "Get some sleep, Harry. Tomorrow we start hunting." She walked to her bedroom door, paused, and looked back. "For the record, this is the worst wedding night in recorded history." "I've had worse nights," Harry said. "Believe it or not." "I believe it. Your file is deeply upsetting." She closed the door. On the other side, she stood in the dark of her new room and pressed her hand against her chest, where the bond lived, where Harry's heartbeat echoed against her own, and she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She was Wednesday Addams. She did not get married. She did not get bound. She did not share her life or her space or her heartbeat with anyone, and now she did. She sat on the bed. Thing crept under the door and climbed into her lap. She stroked his fingers absently. "We're going to find out everything," she told him. "Every person involved, every motive, every plan. And then we're going to dismantle them so thoroughly that the magical world will tell stories about it for the next 213 years. Thing gave her a thumbs up. Wednesday Addams lay down in her new room, in her new life, with a husband she hadn't chosen on the other side of the wall, and stared at the ceiling and began to plan. She did not sleep. She did something far more productive. She schemed. Chapter 2. The wolf you feed. Wednesday woke at 6 a.m., which meant she had slept for exactly 90 minutes, which was 40 minutes more than she'd intended, and an unacceptable lapse in discipline that she blamed entirely on the bond. The thing in her chest had spent the night radiating a low, steady warmth that her body had interpreted as safety, and safety made her sleep, and sleep made her vulnerable, and vulnerability made her furious. She was out of bed and dressed in 4 minutes. Black dress, black stockings, black shoes. Her braids were precise enough to measure with a ruler. She looked exactly the same as she did every morning, because consistency was armor and Wednesday's armor had no gaps. The common room smelled like coffee. Harry was at the small kitchen counter, barefoot, wearing a faded t-shirt and pajama pants, his hair a catastrophe of angles that suggested his pillow had lost a fight. He had 2 mugs out and was pouring from a French press that Wednesday was certain had not been in the suite last night. "I brought it in my trunk," he said, without turning around. "Expanded interior. I have a whole kitchen in there, technically. Didn't sleep much, so I figured I'd make myself useful. You heard me get up. Number I felt you get up. The bond, it shifts when you move, like a compass needle." He turned and held out a mug. "Black, no sugar, am I right?" Wednesday took the mug. She did not acknowledge that he was right, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that he'd read her accurately within 24 hours of knowing her, and that was a level of perceptiveness she wasn't prepared to reward. The coffee was excellent. She hated that the coffee was excellent. "You made this from beans you brought in an expanded trunk," she said. "Ethiopian single origin, dark roast. I spent 6 months after the war just traveling, eating, drinking coffee in different countries. It was the first time in my life I got to choose what I liked." He leaned against the counter and drank from his own mug. "Sounds stupid, probably." "It doesn't sound stupid. It sounds like someone discovering autonomy, a concept that is currently very relevant to our situation." Harry looked at her over the rim of his mug. Morning light through the tower windows hit his eyes and turned them absurdly green, and Wednesday noted this the way she noted all physical details, clinically, catalogically, and with absolutely no emotional response that she was willing to examine. "So," he said, "what did you scheme about all night?" "You knew I was scheming." The bond felt busy, like sitting next to someone taking an exam. Lots of focused energy. Wednesday set her mug down. She pulled a folded paper from the pocket of her dress. She had sewn additional pockets into all her dresses because the fashion industry's refusal to provide women with adequate pockets was a conspiracy she took personally, and spread it on the common room table. "I spent the night constructing a profile of Blackwood's correspondent, the woman in my vision." She'd written in her precise, angular hand, covering both sides of the paper. "Here's what I know." She writes with her left hand. Her stationery is custom, heavy cotton rag paper, European manufacture, likely French or Belgian. Her coded language uses a substitution cipher based on Latin botanical terminology, which suggests either academic training in herbology or pretension. Given the quality of her codework, I'm inclined toward the former. Harry pulled the paper toward him and read it with the focused attention of someone who'd spent years reading intelligence reports. You got all this from one vision. My visions have always been detailed. With the bond's amplification, they're becoming panoramic. I didn't just see the letters, I saw his desk, his hands opening them, the watermarks, the ink color, the way he smiled when he read them. Wednesday paused. He admires her. It's not romantic, it's collegial. She's someone he considers an intellectual equal, which means she's either brilliant or he's delusional about his own standards. Or both. Or both. Harry tapped the paper. Latin botanical cipher. That's specific. How many people in the magical world would use that? I've narrowed it to 3 possibilities. A former professor at Beauxbatons named Marguerite de Lacre, no relation to the famous de Lacres, different branch, who published extensively on magical botany before disappearing from academic life 8 years ago. A researcher at the European Confederation's Office of Arcane Antiquities named Sylvie Mertens, who has the right background but is currently stationed in Brussels and would have difficulty maintaining regular correspondence. And a woman named Isald Vain. Harry's mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Isald Vain, you know her. I know of her, she's Christ. He put the mug down. She runs the Pureblood Reclamation Circle, the PRC. They're not Death Eaters, they're smarter than that. They don't want to kill Muggleborns, they want to manage them, control magical bloodlines through policy and political pressure. Isald's been building power for a decade. She's connected to half the old families in Europe, and she'd have a vested interest in a marriage bond between a Potter and an Addams. A massive interest. Our families represent 2 different pillars of magical society. Mine's the wizarding establishment. Yours is the outcast aristocracy. A permanent magical bond between us is either the most valuable alliance in centuries or the most dangerous one. Depends on which side of her agenda you're standing on. Wednesday retrieved her paper and refolded it. Then she's our primary lead, but I want to confirm before we move. I don't like acting on probability when I can act on certainty. How do you plan to confirm? Blackwood left campus last night. He'll come back. When he does, he'll have something from her, a letter, instructions, something. I've already asked Thing to monitor his office, and I have other resources. The informant network you mentioned. Among other things, she finished her coffee. There's also the immediate problem. Which one? We have several. The school. By now, every student and staff member knows what happened last night. We're going to walk into a building full of people who think they're entitled to an opinion about our situation. I need you to understand something. I don't explain myself. I don't justify my circumstances. And I don't tolerate pity. Wednesday. Harry put his mug in the sink and turned to face her fully. I spent 7 years being stared at, whispered about, and treated like public property by people who thought my survival was their business. I don't need a briefing on how to handle a crowd. I need you to trust that I can walk beside you without embarrassing you. The word trust landed between them and neither of them touched it. We'll see, Wednesday said and walked to the door. The great hall at Nevermore was a cathedral of dark wood and stained glass, and it fell silent when Wednesday and Harry walked in together. Not gradually, not a slow taper of conversation. Silent, instantaneous, as if someone had pressed mute on the entire room. 300 students and 24 faculty members turned to stare, and Wednesday could feel every pair of eyes like a physical pressure, and she walked through it the way she walked through everything, directly, at her own pace, daring anyone to comment. Harry matched her stride. He didn't look around, didn't acknowledge the stares. He walked like he'd been walking into rooms that went quiet for years, which Wednesday supposed he had. They sat at Wednesday's usual table. Enid was already there, and she had clearly been vibrating with the effort of not immediately erupting into questions because she practically levitated when they sat down. Oh my God, are you okay? Both of you. What happened after you just walked out and I couldn't follow because Weems told everyone to go to their rooms and I couldn't sleep and I've been sitting here for 40 minutes and… Enid, Wednesday said. Right, breathing. I'm breathing. Enid took a theatrically deep breath. Then she looked at Harry with the unguarded curiosity of someone who had never learned to hide her emotions and had never wanted to. "Hi, I'm Enid, Wednesday's roommate." "Well, former roommate, I guess. This is so weird." "Hi, Enid," Harry said. "It's nice to meet you properly." "He's polite," Enid said to Wednesday, as if this were a remarkable zoological observation. "You hate polite people." "I hate performative politeness. His appears to be genuine, which makes it tolerable." "That's the nicest thing she's ever said about anyone," Enid told Harry. "I'm writing it down." "Please don't," Wednesday said. Ajax Petropoulos slid into the seat across from them, his beanie pulled low, his expression the careful neutrality of someone who wanted information, but also wanted to survive the conversation. "So, wild night. If you're about to ask questions, don't," Wednesday said. "Wasn't going to. Just wanted to say Blackwood's a creep and everyone's saying so, even the faculty. Thornhill, sorry, the new Thornhill, not the one who anyway, she looked like she wanted to punch him at the staff meeting this morning." "There was a staff meeting?" Harry asked. "Emergency session, 6 a.m. My roommate's dad is on the board and he got a call. Weems is apparently pushing for Blackwood's termination, but he's got tenure and some kind of protective clause in his contract." Wednesday's eyes narrowed. "What kind of protective clause?" "Dunno. Something about academic freedom and experimental demonstrations being protected under the Nevermore Charter. He literally cannot be fired for the demonstration because it was an approved academic event." "He planned for that too," Harry muttered. "Of course he did," Wednesday said. "Every move he's made has been protected by institutional cover. He's not just a researcher, he's a bureaucrat. The most dangerous kind of enemy." Breakfast continued. The staring didn't stop, but it settled into something manageable, the background radiation of curiosity rather than the focused beam of shock. Wednesday ate methodically because fuel was fuel and noticed that Harry ate like someone who'd once gone hungry and had never entirely gotten over it. Quick, efficient, and he didn't leave anything on his plate. The bond hummed contentedly between them. Proximity. Check. They were cooperating loosely. Check. Wednesday could feel it tallying these things, keeping some invisible score, and she found its bookkeeping profoundly irritating. They were halfway through breakfast when the doors of the great hall opened and a man Wednesday had never seen before walked in. He was tall, impeccably dressed in robes that were cut like a business suit, modern, European, expensive. His hair was steel gray, his features sharp, and he moved with the specific confidence of someone who had authority and expected it to be recognized. Behind him walked two younger people, a man and a woman, in matching charcoal robes with silver pins on their lapels. Wednesday didn't recognize the pins, but Harry did. She felt it through the bond, a spike of cold anger so sharp it was almost physical. "Ministry," Harry said. The word came out like something that tasted bad. "British." "International Confederation Liaison. The pins are ICW, International Confederation of Wizards. They've sent a diplomatic envoy." He pushed his plate away. "That was fast. We bonded 12 hours ago, which means someone at Nevermore contacted them immediately, before Blackwood even left campus." The envoy approached the head table where Principal Weems was seated. There was a brief, murmured exchange that Wednesday couldn't hear but could read through body language. The envoy was formal. Weems was resistant, and the compromise they reached involved Weems standing and addressing the room. "Students, if I may have your attention." Weems' voice carried the practiced projection of a woman who had managed outcasts for decades. "We have a visitor from the International Confederation of Wizards, Ambassador Aldrich Voss. He'll be conducting a brief assessment related to last night's events. Classes for the first period are suspended. Mr. Potter, Miss Addams, Ambassador Voss has requested a meeting." "Requested," Wednesday repeated quietly. "Not demanded. Weems is protecting the framing." "Won't matter. A request from the ICW is a demand in a nicer suit." Harry stood. He rolled his shoulders and something shifted in his posture. He was taller, suddenly more present, as if he'd flipped a switch that turned him from tired student into something else. Something that had faced down governments before. Wednesday stood with him. They walked toward the head table together, and the great hall was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Less shocked, more watchful. The student body was paying attention, and Wednesday could feel their interest like a current in the room. They wanted to see how this played out. They wanted to see what Wednesday, Addams, and Harry Potter did when authority came knocking. Wednesday intended to give them a show. Ambassador Voss met them in Weem's office. Apparently, Weem's office was now the default location for confrontations involving Wednesday's marriage, which was a use of the space that Wednesday was certain Weems had never anticipated. Voss sat in the same chair Blackwood had occupied the night before. His two aides stood behind him, silent and decorative. Weems sat behind her desk. She'd offered seats to Wednesday and Harry. Neither sat. Standing was a power position, and Wednesday had no intention of looking up at anyone today. "Mr. Potter," Voss began, and his voice was smooth and accented German, possibly Austrian. "Miss Addams, I appreciate you meeting with me on such short notice." "We didn't have a choice," Wednesday said. "Let's not pretend otherwise. What does the ICW want?" Voss's expression didn't change, but his aides exchanged a glance. People didn't talk to ICW ambassadors like that. Wednesday didn't care what people did. The ICW has been made aware of an unauthorized magical bonding event involving a minor magical artifact and two underage. "We're both 18, Harry said. "Not underage, not minors. Legal adults in both wizarding and outcast jurisdictions. Whatever legal framework you're about to invoke, it doesn't apply." Voss paused, recalculated. "Very well, two legal adults. Regardless, the unbreakable marriage bond is classified as a Category 5 magical event, irreversible, high impact, and of significant political consequence. The ICW has a mandate to assess such events and ensure they don't destabilize the international statute of. The statute of secrecy is irrelevant here," Wednesday said. "The bonding occurred at a registered magical institution between two magical individuals. No muggles, I understand that's your term, were involved or exposed. There is no statute violation. You're here for political reasons, not legal ones." Voss's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Addams, the ICW is concerned because Harry Potter, the most politically significant wizard in modern history, is now permanently bonded to a member of the Addams family, which represents the most powerful outcast dynasty in the Western Hemisphere. You're worried about what this means for the balance of power between wizarding and outcast communities. You're worried about bloodline implications, and you're worried because you can't control it." She let the silence breathe. "I've read the ICW Charter," she continued. "Article 17, Section 3, no governing body may interfere with or adjudicate personal magical bonds formed through legitimate artifact interaction, except in cases of demonstrable coercion upon a minor or non-consenting incapacitated party. We are not minors. We were not incapacitated. And while we did not consent to the bond, the ICW's own precedent in the 1847 Ashworth case establishes that artifact-initiated bonds are classified as environmental magical events, not interpersonal contracts, meaning consent standards don't apply. You have no jurisdiction, you have no standing, and you have no business being in this office." The room was so quiet that Wednesday could hear one of the aides breathing through his mouth, which she found disgusting. Voss looked at her for a long time, then he looked at Harry. "Mr. Potter, perhaps you have a more moderate perspective." Harry's expression was flat calm, the kind of calm that preceded storms. She covered it. "We don't recognize the ICW's authority over our bond. We didn't ask for it, we didn't choose it, and we're dealing with it ourselves. If the ICW wants to be helpful, it can investigate the professor who engineered this, Isald Blackwood, and the individuals he's been collaborating with. If the ICW doesn't want to be helpful, it can leave. And if we feel that the situation requires ongoing monitoring," Harry took a step forward. One step, small. But magic moved with him, the air pressure in the room shifted, the lamplight flickered, and both aides took an involuntary step back. The bond in Wednesday's chest surged, responding to Harry's power, and she felt her own psychic abilities crackle at the edges of her perception. "Then you can try," Harry said quietly. "And I'll respond exactly the way I responded when the British ministry tried to monitor me. I'll tell you once politely. I'll tell you twice firmly. There isn't a third time." The room held its breath. Voss was experienced enough not to flinch, but Wednesday saw the faintest tension in his fingers on the armrest. "Weems," Voss said, turning to the principal with the sharp movement of a man choosing retreat over defeat. "The ICW will expect regular reports on Mr. Potter and Miss Addams's well-being. Quarterly. In writing." "Monthly verbal check-ins," Weems counteroffered, because Weems was a politician and Wednesday respected her instinct for negotiation even if she found the need for it tedious. "Monthly. Written. Monthly. Verbal. My terms or none, Ambassador. Nevermore Academy does not answer to the ICW on student matters, and I will not set a precedent that suggests otherwise." Voss stood. He buttoned his robes. "This isn't over." "Things rarely are," Wednesday said, "but this meeting is. Thank you for visiting Nevermore. Don't come back without an invitation." Voss left. His aides followed. The door closed. Weems exhaled, a long, controlled breath that suggested she'd been holding it for the better part of 10 minutes. "You two are going to be the death of me." "Only if you're lucky," Wednesday said. "The ICW will be back, probably with lawyers. We should be prepared." "I'll handle the institutional politics. You two handle," Weems gestured vaguely. "Whatever it is you're handling." "Justice," Wednesday said. "Survival," Harry said at the same time. They looked at each other. The bond pulsed. "Both," they said. The rest of the morning was consumed by the mundane indignities of institutional life. Schedule adjustments. Their classes had to be synchronized because of the proximity requirement, which meant Wednesday was now enrolled in Harry's defense against the dark arts seminar, and Harry was now enrolled in Wednesday's advanced forensic pathology lab. Room assignments were formally updated. Paperwork was signed. Wednesday despised paperwork only slightly less than she despised small talk, and today involved heroic quantities of both. By noon, they had settled into a rhythm that surprised Wednesday by not being terrible. Harry was quiet when she needed quiet, direct when she needed direction, and sharp enough to keep up with her when she was thinking out loud, which she'd started doing because the bond seemed to register verbal cooperation as particularly satisfying. They were crossing the quad when it happened. Wednesday's vision went white. Not the slow creep of a normal psychic episode. This was a detonation. A flashbang behind her eyes that wiped the world clean and replaced it with somewhere else. She was standing in a corridor she didn't recognize, stone walls, gas lamps, old European architecture. A woman was sitting at a desk, writing, left-handed, elegant penmanship. The stationery was heavy cotton rag, just as Wednesday had predicted, with a watermark she could now read clearly, a snake eating a rose. The woman looked up. Wednesday had never seen her face before, but she recognized her immediately. Late 40s. Beautiful in the way that weapons were beautiful, functional, precise, designed to do damage. Platinum hair cut severely short. Eyes the color of a winter sky, pale blue and absolutely devoid of warmth. She wore a high-collared dress in dark green, and on her lapel was a pin, a circle of thorns around a single drop of blood. "The PRC sigil," Wednesday murmured, inside the vision. The woman spoke. Wednesday couldn't hear the words. The vision was visual only, frustratingly, but she could read lips. The woman was speaking to someone outside the frame. "The bond is formed. Both subjects are intact. Blackwood delivered. Now we deliver our terms." The vision shifted. The same woman, different room, larger, ornate, a council chamber of some kind. She stood before a semicircle of seated figures, all wearing the thorn and blood pin. She was making a presentation. Behind her, projected on the wall in shimmering magical light, were two photographs. Wednesday Addams, Harry Potter. Below the photographs, a title, Project Inheritance Phase 2. The vision cracked and shattered, and Wednesday was back in the quad, on her knees on the stone path, with Harry's hands on her shoulders and his face close to hers, and his voice saying her name with an urgency that she could feel through the bond like a hand reaching through a wall. "Wednesday. Wednesday, come back. You're here. You're at Nevermore. Come back." She blinked. The world was too bright. Everything had the over-sharpened quality of returning from a vision, colors too vivid, sounds too loud, the present moment almost aggressively real. "I'm back," she said. Her voice was steady. Her pulse wasn't, but she'd deal with that privately. "You dropped, mid-step. Your eyes went white." Harry's hands were still on her shoulders. She noticed that his magic was active. She could feel it in the air around them, a protective barrier he'd thrown up instinctively. That was the bond amplifying your vision. Significantly more than last night. Wednesday stood. Harry's hands fell away, but she could feel the echo of them through the bond, warm, steadying, concerned. She filed the sensation away for later analysis. "I have a face now. The woman, Blackwood's partner. Isald Vain. I couldn't confirm the name, but I can describe her precisely enough for identification, and I have more." She looked around the quad. Students were staring again. She didn't care. Project Inheritance, Phase 2. They have a plan that goes beyond the bond itself. We're subjects, components in something larger. Harry's expression hardened. "Tell me everything you saw, every detail." Wednesday told him. They walked while she talked. The proximity helped the bond settle after the vision, and movement kept the students from clustering around them. She described the woman, the room, the council chamber, the photographs, the title. She described the lip reading, the pin, the stationary watermark. "Snake eating a rose," Harry said when she finished. "I know that symbol. It's the House of Vain's family crest. Old French magical nobility. They were aligned with Grindelwald before switching sides just in time to avoid consequences." He paused. "It's definitely Isald. Then we know our antagonists. Blackwood, the visionary who wants to open a door to pure magical energy. Isald Vain and the PRC who want to control or destroy the power imbalance our bond represents. And the bond itself, which has its own demands and its own timeline. Three enemies, and one advantage they haven't accounted for. Which is?" Wednesday stopped walking. They were at the edge of the quad, near the entrance to the old catacombs, Nevermore's underground labyrinth, sealed for decades, officially off-limits. She turned to face Harry, and for a moment she let him see her without the mask, without the armor, without the carefully constructed blankness. Just Wednesday, angry, brilliant, determined. "They think the bond makes us vulnerable," she said. "They think it's a leash. They've calculated our power as individuals and assumed the bond constrains us. But the bond doesn't constrain, it amplifies. My visions are stronger, your magic is more responsive. And we haven't even begun to test the upper limits." Harry met her eyes, green held dark. "You want to test it. I want to weaponize it." He grinned. Not the half-smile from last night, not the ghost of amusement. A real grin, sharp and wild, and a little bit dangerous. "Now you're speaking my language." The entrance to the catacombs was sealed with a lock that had been enchanted by 3 different faculty members and blessed by a priest, which meant it took Wednesday approximately 90 seconds to open. The lock gave up its secrets under her fingers, the enchantments peeling back like layers of old paint, and she felt a small, spiteful satisfaction in the ease of it. "You're terrifying," Harry observed, watching her work. "Thank you, I practice." The catacombs opened before them like a mouth, dark, damp, ancient stone stairs descending into blackness. Wednesday knew these tunnels. She'd explored them during her first semester at Nevermore, mapping every corridor, every chamber, every dead end. She'd found 17 skeletons, 4 cursed objects, and 1 extremely irritated ghost named Bartholomew who had been sealed down here in 1847 and was very cross about it. "There's a practice chamber about 200 meters in," she said. "Stone walls, high ceiling, naturally dampened, magic doesn't echo down there. Good for testing high-intensity abilities without attracting attention. You have a secret underground practice room." "I have several. This one is the most structurally sound." They descended. Harry conjured light, not with a wand, Wednesday noticed, but with his hand. A ball of warm golden light that floated above his palm like a tame star. It was casual, effortless. The kind of wandless magic that most fully trained wizards couldn't manage on their best day, and Harry did it the way someone else would flip on a light switch. "You don't use a wand," Wednesday said. "I can. I used to. Holly and Phoenix feather, 11 inches. It broke during the war and I had it repaired, but after that, things started happening without it. Magic responding to thought instead of gesture, I think. He paused, considering. I think the multiple near-death experiences did something, rewired the connection between intent and power. The wand became training wheels. And you stopped needing them. I stopped needing them. They reached the practice chamber. It was exactly as Wednesday remembered, a natural cavern about 60 feet across with a vaulted stone ceiling and a floor worn smooth by centuries of underground water flow. The air was cool and still. Nothing lived down here. Nothing had for a long time. Wednesday lit the torches on the walls with a thought, her own small act of ambient magic, telekinetic rather than conjured, flicking the friction ignition mechanism she'd installed last semester. The chamber bloomed with firelight. First, she said, shrugging off her blazer and draping it over a stone outcropping, we test the bond's amplification range. I want to know exactly what it's doing to our abilities, quantified, not guessed. How do you quantify psychic visions? Duration, clarity, controllability, and scope. Before the bond, my visions were involuntary, lasted 3 to 7 seconds, and showed fragmentary images. Since the bond, I've had 2 visions, both lasted over 30 seconds. Both were cinematic in clarity, and the second one contained readable text and lip-readable speech. That's an order of magnitude improvement. And you want to see if you can trigger one intentionally. Wednesday looked at him. I want to see if I can trigger one intentionally while you actively channel magic nearby. If the bond amplifies through proximity and cooperation, your power output should boost my psychic range. Harry rolled up his sleeves. Wednesday observed the scars on his forearms, not dramatically, not with pity, just with the clinical attention she gave all data. He had been through wars. The marks were a map of survival, and she read them the way she read all maps for information about the terrain. All right, he said. What do you need me to do? Cast something big. I want to feel the bond react to your power at full output. Full output might collapse this chamber. Then don't collapse the chamber, constrain the power, not the volume. Show me what you can do in a controlled space. Harry looked at her for a beat. Then he took a breath and the air changed. Wednesday had felt magic before. She lived in a world of magic, came from a family saturated in it, attended a school built on it. But what Harry did was different. His magic didn't feel like a spell being cast. It felt like a tide coming in. Massive, inevitable, and natural in a way that individual spells never were. He raised his hand and the stone floor of the chamber rippled. Not cracked, not shattered, rippled like water, like the solid rock had temporarily forgotten it was solid and flowed in response to his will. The ripple spread outward in a perfect circle, and where it passed, the rough stone became smooth as glass. He was reshaping the chamber floor with raw transmutation, no incantation, no wand, no visible effort. Wednesday felt the bond ignite, not the gentle hum of proximity or the warm pulse of cooperation. This was a roar, a surge, a dam breaking. Harry's magic poured through the bond and hit her psychic centers like electricity hitting water, and her third eye didn't just open, it exploded. She saw everything. The chamber, the catacombs around it, every tunnel, every room, every sealed door, every hidden passage, rendered in her mind as a perfect three-dimensional map. She saw the things living in the deep tunnels, creatures, old ones, things that had been down here long before Nevermore existed. She saw them curled in dark corners, sleeping, waiting. She saw the structural weaknesses in the chamber walls, the fossilized remains embedded in the stone, the underground river that ran 40 feet below them. She pushed further, up, out, through the stone and into the school above. She saw Nevermore in psychic overlay, every room, every person, every conversation happening at that moment. Enid in her new solo room, texting furiously. Bianca in the library, reading something she didn't want anyone to see. Weems in her office on the phone, arguing with someone in a language Wednesday identified as Old English, legal formulations, treaty language. She pushed further still, past the school, into the town, into the forest. She saw Blackwood. He was in a cabin 2 miles northeast of campus, sitting at a table writing. The handwriting was urgent, sloppy by his standards. A letter. She read it, every word, as clearly as if it were in front of her face. Isald, the bond exceeded projections. Both subjects are resonating at levels I've never recorded. The stone is depleted, but the bond is self-sustaining. The siphon prototype needs recalibration for the higher energy band. I'll need your team's instruments. Mine aren't sensitive enough. Come to Nevermore. See for yourself. This is everything we planned and more. AB Wednesday snapped back to the present. The chamber was quiet. Harry stood in the center of the now glassy floor, his hand still raised, watching her with an expression of focused concern. "How long was I gone?" she asked. "About 2 minutes. Your eyes went completely black, not white this time, black." Wednesday touched her face absently. "I saw everything, the entire school, the catacombs, the town. And Blackwood, he's in a cabin northeast of campus, writing to Isald Vain right now, inviting her here. He says the bond exceeded projections, and he needs her instruments for something called a siphon prototype." Harry lowered his hand. The magic ebbed. "The siphon, that must be the device for channeling the bond's energy. He's building a machine to harvest us." Wednesday's voice was flat, not emotionless, controlled. The anger was there, deep and cold, and she was holding it like a weapon she hadn't decided to deploy yet. "He wants to use the bond's energy output to open a dimensional gateway, and he's inviting Isald Vain to Nevermore to help him do it. So they are working together. For now. But their goals aren't aligned. He wants scientific discovery. She wants political control. That's a partnership with an expiration date." Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, "You said you saw things in the catacombs, creatures. In the deep sections, sleeping, old. I didn't get a detailed look. I was pushing outward, not down. But they're there. How many?" "At least a dozen that I registered. Probably more." Harry looked at the floor, at the glass-smooth stone he'd created, at the darkness of the tunnels beyond the torchlight. Blackwood's letter said to come to Nevermore. If Isald Vain shows up with an entourage, and Blackwood has a device that siphons magical energy, and there are ancient creatures sleeping in the tunnels under the school, then Nevermore is a powder keg, Wednesday finished, and we're sitting on top of it. They stood in the chamber and let the implications settle. The bond between them was calm now, satisfied almost, as if the synchronized use of their powers had fed it something it craved. Wednesday could feel Harry's heartbeat in her chest, steady and strong, and she could feel the edges of his emotions, not the details, not yet, but the shape of them. Determination, anger, and something else, something quieter that she chose not to examine too closely. "The bond like that," Harry said. He was feeling it too, she could tell by the way he pressed his hand against his sternum, testing the sensation. "It responds to cooperative use of power. We already knew that theoretically. Now we've confirmed it empirically. It felt like," he searched for the word, "like tuning an instrument, like we were two frequencies that suddenly matched. Don't romanticize it." "I'm not. I'm describing a physical sensation. The romanticism is all in your head, Addams." She looked at him sharply. He looked back with an expression of complete innocence that fooled her not at all, because she was excellent at identifying deception, and his eyes were laughing even though his mouth wasn't. "If you're going to be insufferable," she said, "at least be useful while doing it. We need a plan for Isald Vain's arrival." "Agreed. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that we let her come, let her make her pitch, and then we take her apart. Diplomatically. If necessary. I prefer other methods, but I'm adaptable." They left the catacombs and emerged into the weak afternoon sunlight. The air smelled like wet leaves and old stone, and the particular ozone tang that Nevermore always had after something magical had happened, which at Nevermore was essentially always. Enid intercepted them on the way to the tower. She was moving at the speed of someone with urgent information, and the attention span to deliver it in a breathless rush. "Okay, so, 2 things. 1, Principal Weems announced that Blackwood is on administrative leave but not fired, and half the student body is furious and there's a petition going around. 2, there are people at the gate, official-looking people, not ICW, different pins, and there's a woman with them who looks like she could freeze water by looking at it." Wednesday and Harry exchanged a glance. Through the bond, she felt his recognition. She's already here, Wednesday said. They went to the gate. Isald Vain was exactly as Wednesday had seen in her vision. Tall, platinum-haired, winter-eyed, impeccable. She stood at Nevermore's wrought iron entrance gate with 5 attendants arranged behind her, in a formation that was technically respectful and functionally intimidating. She wore the dark green dress, the thorn-end blood pin. She looked like a woman who had never been denied anything in her life and had come to ensure that record remained unbroken. Weems was already there, and so was the school's head of security, a broad, silent werewolf named Garrett whose primary qualifications were that he was 7 feet tall and had once thrown a car at someone. Weems was in full diplomatic mode, spine straight, smile sharp, every word measured. Miss Vain, Nevermore Academy welcomes visitors by appointment only. I don't recall receiving a request. Principal Weems. Isald's voice was exactly what Wednesday expected, low, clear, cultured, with a French accent polished to a razor edge. I apologize for the lack of notice. The situation, as I'm sure you appreciate, is unprecedented. I represent the interests of several old families who have legitimate concerns about last night's events. The ICW has already sent a representative. We're quite covered. The ICW represents governments. I represent families, old families, families with long memories and longer reach. Isald's eyes moved past Weems and found Wednesday and Harry approaching. Ah, and there they are. Wednesday stopped 10 feet from the gate. She didn't speak. She waited. Let Isald fill the silence. People who were accustomed to controlling conversations hated silence, and Wednesday wielded it like a blade. Isald studied them. Her gaze was clinical, measuring, assessing, calculating value. Wednesday had seen that look before. Collectors looked at rare objects that way. Predators looked at prey that way. Isald was both. Miss Addams, Mr. Potter. Isald inclined her head, a minimal gesture of acknowledgement, not respect. I've come with a proposal that I believe you'll find interesting. Interesting proposals are usually dangerous ones, Harry said. All worthwhile things are dangerous, Mr. Potter. Surely you know that better than most. I know that people who show up uninvited with 5 bodyguards and a smile usually want something they don't deserve. What do you want, Miss Vain? Isald's smile didn't waver. I want to dissolve your bond. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Wednesday felt Harry's surprise through the bond, not large, not dramatic, but a flicker of genuine shock that someone was offering what should have been impossible. The bond is irreversible, Wednesday said. Every source confirms this. Every public source, yes. But the old families have access to knowledge that doesn't exist in libraries or academic journals. There is a ritual, ancient, complex, and not without cost that can sever an unbreakable marriage bond. What cost? Harry asked, and Wednesday heard the tactical edge in his voice. He wasn't considering it, he was gathering intelligence. One of the bonded pair must sacrifice their magical core, permanently. They would become, in essence, mundane, without magic, without power, without the abilities that define them. Isald delivered this information the way someone might describe the price of a luxury item, significant but not unreasonable, if you could afford it. Wednesday let 3 seconds pass, then 5. The silence was heavy and deliberate, and she saw Isald's composure hold, but just barely, a tightening around the eyes, a tension in the jaw. Isald wasn't accustomed to being made to wait. No, Wednesday said. You haven't considered. I don't need to consider. You've offered us a solution that requires one of us to become powerless while the other remains whole. That's not a solution. That's a weapon disguised as mercy. You're hoping one of us is desperate enough or selfless enough to accept the loss. And in doing so, you eliminate half of the bond's power and gain leverage over the remaining half. Isald's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, a recalculation, a reassessment. She was adjusting her understanding of the person in front of her, and Wednesday took a cold satisfaction in watching it happen. Furthermore, Wednesday continued, you arrived within 12 hours of the bonding, which means you were already nearby, which means you knew it was going to happen, which means your offer to dissolve the bond is not an act of charity, it's phase 2. The temperature dropped. Not metaphorically, literally. Frost crept along the wrought iron bars of the gate, and Wednesday felt Harry's magic in it, not rage, not aggression, but the simple physical expression of cold fury radiating outward from someone with enough power to affect the weather. Project Inheritance, Harry said. That's what you're calling it. We know about your council presentation. We know about the photographs. We know about Phase 2. Isald Vain was still for a long moment. The frost spread. Her attendants shifted uncomfortably. One of them reached for something inside his robes, and Garrett growled, a low, subsonic rumble that Wednesday felt in her teeth, and the hand withdrew. Then Isald laughed. It was a real laugh, which was worse than a fake one because it meant she was genuinely amused, and people who were genuinely amused when their plans were exposed were people who had contingencies. Remarkable, she said. You are absolutely remarkable, both of you. Blackwood said you were extraordinary, but I confess I thought he was overselling. She straightened her gloves, an act of composure recovery so smooth it was almost invisible. Very well. You know about the project. You know about the partnership. You know more than I expected and less than you think. But I'll give you this, the offer to dissolve the bond was genuine. The cost is real, and the ritual exists. We're not interested, Wednesday said. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but the bond will make demands, Miss Addams. It will ask for things neither of you is prepared to give. And when the cost of keeping it exceeds the cost of breaking it, and it will, you'll remember that Isald Vain offered you a door. She turned. Her attendants fell into formation behind her. One more thing, she said, pausing without turning around. Blackwood is not your friend. He's not anyone's friend. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's promised Weems, his goals are not aligned with yours, mine, or anyone else's. He wants the wellspring. He'll burn this school to get it. I'd suggest you take that seriously. She walked into the gray afternoon and was gone. Weems exhaled. That woman is the most dangerous person who has ever stood at my gate, and I've been principal for 15 years. She's not the most dangerous person here, Wednesday said, and turned and walked toward the tower with Harry beside her, and the bond between them humming with the fierce, electric energy of two people who had just been threatened by a very powerful woman and had sent her away empty-handed. The evening came down over Nevermore like a curtain, and Wednesday stood at the tower window and watched the lights of the school go out one by one. Behind her, Harry sat on the couch reading through a stack of books he'd pulled from his expanded trunk, histories of covenant bonds, analyses of magical amplification, theoretical frameworks for dimensional boundaries. He read the way he did everything, she'd noticed, with total focus, fingers absently tapping the page, occasionally muttering to himself. The bond was quiet between them. Not passive, she could feel it working, processing, integrating the day's cooperative efforts like a muscle growing stronger after use. It scared her in a way that very few things did because it was changing them and she couldn't quantify the rate of change. You're worried, Harry said from the couch. Not a question. I don't worry, I strategize. You're strategizing loudly, the bond is practically vibrating. Wednesday turned from the window. The vision I had in the catacombs showed me the school's deep infrastructure. There are creatures down there, old ones, pre-Nevermore, possibly pre-colonial. They're dormant, but the bond's energy might have disturbed them. You want to check. I want to clear them. If Blackwood's siphon is going to be generating the kind of energy he's planning and those things wake up, the school is at risk from below and above simultaneously. Harry closed his book. You want to go into the catacombs, tonight, and fight ancient monsters? Yes. He stood up. I was hoping you'd say that. I've been sitting still for hours and it's making me twitch. You've been reading. Reading makes me twitch when there's something to fight. It's a character flaw, one of several. They descended into the catacombs for the second time that day. This time, Wednesday led them deeper, past the practice chamber, past the map sections, into tunnels she'd never fully explored because they'd felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but heavy. Thick with the kind of ancient energy that accumulated in places where magical creatures slept for centuries. The air grew colder as they went deeper. The walls were rougher, less shaped by human hands. Strange symbols were carved into the stone at intervals. Not modern magical notation, but something older, something that predated the Latin alphabet. Wednesday photographed them with the small camera she always carried because documentation was the difference between a mystery and a case file. "These are ward markers," Harry said, running his fingers over one of the carvings. "Old ones. Somebody sealed these tunnels a long time ago. The wards have degraded." Degraded how much? Enough to let things wake up, not enough to let them out. Yet, they pressed deeper. The tunnels narrowed, then widened into a vast cavern that Wednesday's earlier psychic scan had registered as the main nest. The ceiling was lost in darkness. The floor was uneven, broken by stalagmites and the remains of what looked like stone furniture, altars maybe, or tables. This space had been used before, a long time ago. Harry's wandless light expanded, pushing the darkness back, and Wednesday saw them. Creatures, sprawled across the cavern floor like discarded dolls. They were roughly humanoid, but wrong, too long in the limb, too narrow in the skull, with skin like wet stone and mouths that were just vertical slits in featureless faces. They were the size of large dogs, maybe 12 of them, curled in clusters around the base of the stalagmites. Their breathing was slow, deep, synchronized, the respiration of a collective organism, not individuals. "Ghouls," Harry breathed. "Number not ghouls, these are older, Draugr maybe. No, the body structure is wrong, these are lithomorphs," Wednesday said. "Stoneborn. They're in Professor Thornhill's bestiary, the real one, not the school-approved edition. Born from magical saturation of geological formations. They're essentially animate rock with predatory instincts. Dormant for centuries but capable of extreme violence when wakened. And the bond's energy might have started waking them up. Given that 2 of them have opened their eyes, yes." Harry looked. She was right. 2 of the creatures had their eyes open, flat, mineral, the color of quartz. They weren't moving. They were watching. The way prey animals watch predators, trying to decide between fight and flight. Wednesday calculated 12 creatures. Unknown capabilities, but Professor Thornhill's bestiary classified lithomorphs as highly resistant to conventional magic due to their mineral composition. They were strong, fast when fully awake, and nearly impervious to cutting curses and stunners. Fire worked. Transmutation worked, and physical destruction worked if you could hit hard enough. "Options," she said. "I can transmute them. Turn the stone of their bodies into something else, sand, glass, water. Same thing I did to the floor earlier, but targeted. That requires focus. If they rush you, then you'd need to keep them off me." Wednesday reached into the concealed sheath at her thigh and drew a blade, 12 inches of obsidian-edged steel, enchanted by her Uncle Fester with enough destructive energy to cut through a bank vault. She'd been carrying it since she was 14. "I can do that," she said. Harry looked at the blade. Looked at her. The bond pulsed between them, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with something that felt like the moment before a symphony begins, when every instrument is ready and the conductor's hand is raised. "On 3, he said. "On 1. I don't waste time." She moved. The lithomorphs reacted to motion. All 12 snapped awake simultaneously, their stone bodies unfolding with a grinding sound like boulders rolling downhill. They were fast, faster than their mineral composition suggested, and they moved with an insectoid coordination that confirmed they operated as a hive. Wednesday was faster. She hit the first one at full sprint, her blade slicing across its neck where the stone was thinnest, and the obsidian edge cut through like it was limestone, not granite. The creature's head separated from its body and both pieces hit the floor and shattered. Behind her, Harry's magic detonated. He didn't throw spells. He reshaped reality. The floor of the cavern surged upward around the nearest cluster of lithomorphs, stone flowing like water, encasing 3 of them in cocoons of their own terrain, and then transmuting the cocoons from granite to glass. The glass contracted. The lithomorphs inside crumbled. Wednesday spun, ducked a swiping claw from a 4th creature, and drove her blade upward through its torso. It was like stabbing through packed earth, resistance, then give, then collapse. The lithomorph fell in pieces. The bond was singing. There was no other word for it. The connection between them was alive with shared awareness. She knew where Harry was without looking, felt his magic surging behind her like a wave at her back, and when she moved left, he compensated right, covering the angle she'd opened. They'd never fought together before. They'd never trained together. But the bond provided a synchronization that should have taken years to develop, an intuitive, physical understanding of each other's movement patterns that turned two individuals into a single fighting organism. 3 more lithomorphs rushed her in formation. Wednesday didn't retreat. She stepped into the charge, because Addams didn't retreat, and she put her blade through the first one's eye socket, kicked the second one in the center of mass hard enough to stagger it. And then Harry's magic caught the third mid-leap, turning its body from stone to sand in an instant. It dissolved in the air like a cloud, and Wednesday was already moving, using the momentum of her kick to spin and bring her blade across the staggered one's neck. 6 down. The remaining 6 had learned. They pulled back, clustering, their quartz eyes bright with something that might have been intelligence or might have been instinct, but either way made them more dangerous, not less. "They're coordinating," Wednesday said. "I see it. They're going to try to rush us together, all 6 at once." "Can you take all 6 simultaneously? If you give me 3 seconds, yes." Wednesday sheathed her blade and reached inside herself to the place where her psychic abilities lived, the cold, dark space behind her eyes where the visions came from. She'd never used it offensively before. She'd never had to. But the bond was amplifying everything, and she wanted to find out exactly how far that amplification went. She pushed. A wave of psychic force, invisible, silent, and brutal, hit the 6 lithomorphs like a wall. It wasn't telekinesis, not exactly. It was something more specific. She had pushed her psychic sight into them, overloaded their hive mind connection with raw sensory data, the mental equivalent of shining a floodlight into a dark room full of bats. The lithomorphs froze, locked in place. Their mineral eyes went dark as their collective consciousness shorted out. 3 seconds. Harry acted. His magic rolled through the cavern like a controlled earthquake, and the floor around the 6 frozen creatures liquefied, then surged upward, then hardened into 6 perfect stone coffins. The lithomorphs were sealed inside before they could reboot. Then Harry clenched his fist, and the coffins compressed. The sound was like 6 hammers striking 6 anvils simultaneously. When it was done, there were 6 cubes of dense stone on the cavern floor, each about the size of a shoebox and nothing living inside them. Silence. Wednesday stood in the center of the cavern, breathing hard. The psychic push had cost her more than she'd expected, and Harry stood beside her, his magic still crackling in the air around him, and they looked at the destruction they'd wrought together, and neither of them spoke for a moment because the bond was doing it for them. It was thrumming with satisfaction, with harmony, with the deep resonance of 2 powerful beings operating in perfect synchronization. And it felt good. Wednesday hated that it felt good. 12 down, Harry said. His voice was slightly hoarse. "Are there more?" Wednesday extended her psychic sense, carefully, conservatively, because she was tired and overspending energy underground was how people died. She scanned the deeper tunnels, the chambers beyond, the dark spaces where her earlier vision had shown movement. Clear. These were the only active ones. The rest are in deeper dormancy. They won't wake unless there's a much larger energy event. Like someone activating a dimensional siphon. Exactly like that. They looked at each other across the ruined cavern. Wednesday's hair had come loose from one braid, a single strand hanging across her face, and her dress was dusty with stone powder. Harry had a scratch on his cheek from a piece of shrapnel, already closing because his body healed fast, another gift from surviving things that should have killed him. "That was," Harry started. "Effective," Wednesday said. "I was going to say fun. Fun is a word for people who don't take combat seriously. Fun is a word for people who are good at things and enjoy being good at them. Are you going to pretend you didn't enjoy that?" Wednesday wiped the stone dust from her blade and sheathed it. "I'm going to decline to answer on the grounds that my response might satisfy you, and I'm not in the business of providing satisfaction." Harry laughed, a real laugh, deep and startled, and the bond flooded with warmth that Wednesday felt all the way to her fingertips. She turned away before he could see whatever her face was doing, because she wasn't sure what it was doing and she didn't want witnesses until she'd identified it. "We should go," she said. "I need to report the lithomorph nest to Weems, and you need to put something on that scratch before your hero complex decides it doesn't need medical attention. It's already healed. Then you need to come upstairs because I want coffee, and you make the only acceptable coffee within a 50-mile radius, and the bond requires proximity." "Did you just compliment my coffee?" "I stated a fact. Facts are not compliments." They climbed back through the catacombs, and the darkness closed behind them, and above them Nevermore Academy slept under a sky that no longer held the sable equinox but still felt charged, still felt heavy with the weight of things that had been set in motion and could not be stopped. In the tower suite, Harry made coffee because Wednesday had asked, although she would have died before using that word, and they sat in the common room and planned. Things sat on the table between them, occasionally handing Wednesday notes he'd taken during his surveillance of Blackwood's office. Blackwood had returned to campus at 9 p.m., collected several items from his office. Things notes included detailed descriptions and crude but surprisingly accurate sketches, and retreated to his quarters. He'd been making phone calls. Thing hadn't been able to hear the conversations but had recorded the numbers through vibrations. "He's moving faster than expected," Wednesday said, reviewing Thing's intelligence. "The siphon prototype. If he's gathering components, he's further along than I thought." "How long until Isald arrives? Officially, I mean, with whatever team she's bringing." Based on her departure timeline and the logistical requirements of moving a PRC delegation, I'd estimate 72 hours, possibly less if she expedites. "So we have 3 days to understand the siphon, map Blackwood's network, and prepare for a political confrontation with one of the most powerful people in the magical world." 3 days is generous. I've accomplished more in less." Harry leaned back and looked at her. The lamplight made shadows on his face, highlighted the scar, caught the green of his eyes. The bond pulsed gently between them, not demanding, not pushing, just present. A heartbeat that belonged to both of them. "Wednesday." "What?" "For the record, I'm glad it was you." She looked at him. "Glad. If this had to happen, and it did happen, and we can't change it, I'm glad the bond picked someone who fights like that, who thinks like that. I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted to protect me or use me. You don't want either, you just want to win. Winning is a form of protection. Maybe, but that's not why you do it." Wednesday held his gaze for 3 seconds longer than was comfortable, and then looked away, because the bond was doing something warm and complicated in her chest, and she refused to examine it in front of an audience. "Go to sleep, Potter," she said. "We have work to do tomorrow." "It's Potter now. What happened to Harry?" "Harry is for combat and coffee. Potter is for when you're being sentimental and I need to maintain distance." "Duly noted, Addams." She stood, took her coffee, walked to her room. At the door she paused, didn't turn around. "For the record, your combat transmutation is remarkable. I've never seen anyone reshape matter that quickly." "Was that a compliment?" "It was a fact. Good night." She closed the door, leaned against it, pressed her hand to her chest where the bond hummed. Thing crawled under the door and looked up at her expectantly. "Not a word," Wednesday told him. Thing mimed zipping his lips, a challenging gesture for a disembodied hand, but he managed it and climbed onto her nightstand. Wednesday sat at the small desk in her room. She opened her laptop. She began cross-referencing the phone numbers Thing had recorded with her existing database of magical contacts, shell companies, and institutional phone lines. She worked methodically, precisely, and without rest, because the bond might have given her an involuntary husband and an amplified set of powers, and a warm feeling in her chest that she refused to name, but it had not given her anything more valuable than what she'd always had: her mind, her will, her absolute refusal to be anyone's pawn. 3 days until Isald Vain returned. Wednesday intended to be ready. She worked until dawn. Chapter 3. What belongs to the dark. Wednesday had not slept in 41 hours, and she was performing beautifully. Sleep was a negotiation she conducted with her body on terms she dictated, and right now her body could wait because she'd spent the pre-dawn hours unraveling something that changed the shape of everything. 3 of the phone numbers Thing had recorded from Blackwood's calls didn't connect to people. They connected to a supply chain, industrial-grade magical conductors, crystallized ley line fragments, and a substance called quintessence gel, which Wednesday had only ever encountered in theoretical papers because it didn't exist in commercial quantities. It had to be synthesized, at enormous expense, by someone with access to a sophisticated alchemical laboratory. Blackwood didn't have a laboratory, not at Nevermore and not in the cabin northeast of campus, which meant someone was supplying him. She was tracing the supply chain's third node, a shell company registered in Luxembourg called Verdant Meridian Holdings, when Harry knocked on her door at 7 a.m. "Coffee's ready. Also, your hand is watching me with what I can only describe as judgment. Thing judges everyone. It's his love language." She emerged from her room with the laptop under her arm and the look of a woman who had uncovered something unpleasant and intended to share the displeasure. Harry took one look at her and poured the coffee stronger than usual. "You didn't sleep. Sleep is for people who haven't discovered that their professor is sourcing materials for a dimensional siphon through a Luxembourg shell company with ties to the Vain family's financial network." Harry set the French press down. "Say that again." Wednesday sat at the common room table and opened the laptop. Verdant Meridian Holdings, registered 18 months ago. On the surface, it's an import-export company dealing in rare alchemical reagents. The registration documents are clean, too clean actually, the kind of clean that only happens when someone's paid a very good lawyer to make sure nothing looks suspicious. But the registered agent is a man named Thierry Mertens. Mertens. You mentioned that name yesterday, Sylvie Mertens, the researcher at the European Confederation. His sister. And Sylvie Mertens, despite being a mid-level researcher with a mid-level salary, owns a 30% stake in Verdant Meridian Holdings. The other 70% is held through a trust administered by a firm in Paris that has represented the Vain family's interests for over a century. Harry sat across from her. He was doing the thing again, the rapid processing thing, his eyes moving slightly as he connected pieces. So Blackwood's getting his materials through a company funded by Isald Vain, which means the partnership isn't new. They've been planning this for at least 18 months, long before I enrolled at Nevermore, long before you transferred. They've been building the infrastructure and waiting for the right subjects. Why us? Power, compatibility, and availability. Wednesday pulled up a second document, her own notes, compiled overnight. The Obsidian Covenant stone doesn't bond randomly. The literature, the real literature, not the sanitized versions, indicates that the stone selects subjects based on magical resonance. It needs two sources that are powerful enough individually to sustain the bond and complementary enough to generate harmonic amplification. Blackwood studied every student at Nevermore for years looking for the right combination. He never found it. Until I showed up. Until you showed up. Your magical signature is off the charts, the killing curse, the resurrection, the multiple near-death experiences. You're a magical anomaly, and I'm a psychic with Addams' bloodline abilities that have been building for generations. Alone, either of us would have been insufficient. Together, we're the perfect battery. His word, not mine, but yes. Wednesday closed the laptop. There's more. The quintessence gel, it's the key component of the siphon. It acts as a medium for transferring magical energy from one source to another, like a wire carrying electrical current. Without it, the siphon is just a shell. With it, it becomes functional, and based on the quantities Blackwood ordered, he's not building a prototype. Harry's eyes sharpened. He's building the real thing. He's been building the real thing all along. The prototype language in his letter to Isald was misdirection or self-delusion. The components he's assembled are sufficient for a full-scale dimensional siphon capable of channeling the bond's output into a focused beam. He could punch through dimensional barriers with it. The wellspring, or whatever's actually on the other side. Because here's what Blackwood hasn't considered, or has considered and doesn't care about. Every reliable account of dimensional breaches in the historical record ends in catastrophe. Not sometimes. Every time. The Tunguska event of 1908 was a dimensional breach. The Muggles think it was a meteor. The collapse of Atlantis, dimensional breach. The Wednesday, Harry held up a hand. I believe you. I fought Voldemort in a graveyard where he tore a hole in reality to resurrect himself, and what came through nearly unmade the landscape. I don't need the historical examples, I need the plan. Wednesday appreciated the efficiency. The plan is threefold. First, we locate the siphon and assess its completion status. Second, we confront Blackwood with evidence he can't deflect, not accusations, not suspicions, proof. Third, we prepare for Isald Vain's arrival with enough leverage to neutralize her politically before she can act. And the bond. The bond is our asset. Every time we use it cooperatively, it gets stronger. Every time it gets stronger, our individual abilities amplify. Blackwood designed us to be a power source. We're going to be a weapon instead. Things scuttled across the table and handed Wednesday a folded note. She opened it, read it, and her expression underwent a transformation that Harry would later describe as the closest thing to joy he'd ever seen on her face, which was to say, one corner of her mouth twitched upward by approximately 2 millimeters. Thing found the siphon, she said. It's in the sub-basement of the old greenhouse, the one that was condemned after the Thornhill incident. Of course it's in the creepy condemned building. Where else would a mad scientist keep his doomsday device? You're being glib. I'm being accurate. He's a mad scientist with a doomsday device in a condemned greenhouse at a school for supernatural outcasts. If I wrote this in a letter, no one would believe me. Wednesday folded the note and stood. We go now. Before first period. Blackwood is teaching, or he was teaching before his suspension. Either way, his morning routine keeps him in the faculty wing until 9. That gives us 90 minutes. Lead the way, Mrs. Potter. Wednesday fixed him with a look that would have withered a lesser man's cardiovascular system. If you ever call me that again, I will discover new and innovative uses for your skeleton. Addams it is. They moved through Nevermore's corridors with purpose. It was early enough that the hallways were mostly empty, a few early risers, a vampire or two heading to their light-sealed dormitories after a night's activities, a maintenance golem methodically polishing the floors. Nobody paid them much attention. The novelty of seeing them together was already fading, replaced by the school's natural cycle of drama and gossip, and Wednesday appreciated the speed with which teenage attention spans moved on. The condemned greenhouse was on the eastern edge of campus, behind the botanical gardens that the new Professor Thornhill maintained with considerably less homicidal intent than her predecessor. The building itself was a Victorian glass and iron structure, most of its panes cracked or missing, the iron frame corroded to a dark orange. Caution tape crossed the entrance. A sign read, "Condemned, no entry by order of Principal WEMS." Wednesday ducked under the tape. "We're going to get in trouble," Harry said, following her. "Trouble is a concept invented by people with authority to discourage people with initiative. I have initiative. I've noticed." The greenhouse interior was a ruin of dead plants and broken glass. The air smelled like rot and rust, and the faint chemical tang of old fertilizer. Wednesday ignored all of it and moved to the back of the structure, where a trapdoor was set into the floor recently, based on the fresh-cut edges and the absence of corrosion on the hinges. Someone had installed it within the last few months. She knelt and examined the lock. Magical but not complex, a standard ward lock keyed to a single magical signature. Blackwood's presumably. "Can you crack it?" Harry asked. "Yes, but you could do it faster. The lock responds to magical force. Overwhelming it is faster than picking it." Harry crouched beside her. He placed his hand on the lock and pushed, not physically, magically. Wednesday felt it through the bond, a controlled pulse of raw power that hit the ward lock like a sledgehammer hitting a padlock. The enchantment shattered. The lock clicked open. "Subtle," Wednesday said. "You said faster, not subtler." The trapdoor opened onto a spiral staircase, metal, new, bolted into the stone of the sub-basement. They descended into a space that was dramatically different from the ruined greenhouse above. The sub-basement had been renovated, clean walls, magical lighting, cold blue, the color of laboratory illumination, climate control that kept the air at a precise, dry temperature, and at the center of the room on a reinforced table sat the siphon. Wednesday stopped at the bottom of the stairs and took it in. The device was about 3 feet tall, roughly cylindrical, and built from a combination of materials that shouldn't have been compatible, crystallized ley line fragments set in a frame of dark metal, connected by channels filled with the telltale iridescent shimmer of quintessence gel. It looked unfinished. Several connection points were empty, waiting for components that hadn't been installed yet, but even incomplete, it hummed. A low, subsonic vibration that Wednesday felt in her bones. "It's active," Harry said. He'd gone still in the way he went still when danger was present, not frozen but gathered like a spring compressed. Even without the missing pieces, it's pulling ambient energy from the environment. Wednesday extended her psychic sense toward the device. Carefully. Gently, like dipping a finger into water to test the temperature. The siphon reached back. She yanked her awareness away so fast that she staggered. The device had, there was no other way to describe it, tasted her. Sampled her psychic energy the way a mosquito samples blood, a quick exploratory probe that had taken a tiny amount before she could withdraw. "Don't touch it with your magic," she said sharply. "It feeds. It's designed to feed on exactly the kind of energy we produce." Harry's hands, which had been rising toward the device, dropped to his sides. "Good to know. Did it hurt you?" "Number, it took a sample. Infinitesimal. But now it knows my signature. It'll be calibrated to me, to us, if it samples you too. So we can't destroy it by magical force. Not without feeding it more power than we'd be comfortable with. We need a different approach." Wednesday circled the device, studying it from every angle. She photographed it. She cataloged the components: 18 ley line crystals, 4 channels of quintessence gel, 9 empty mounting points, a central core that appeared to be a hollow chamber designed to contain something. She peered into the chamber. "There's a receptacle in the center," she said, "shaped like a cradle, designed to hold something spherical, about the size of a human heart," Harry said. He was looking at the device's base, where a set of equations had been engraved directly into the metal. These are resonance equations. They describe the energy output of a covenant bond at various levels of synchronization. Look at this variable here. It represents the emotional resonance component. As the bonded pair's emotional connection deepens, the energy output increases exponentially. He traced the final equation. At full emotional resonance, the output is. Wednesday, these numbers are insane. That's enough energy to open a door to another dimension. Yes, we knew that. Number, that's enough energy to open a door and hold it open indefinitely. This isn't a peek through a keyhole. This is a highway. Wednesday felt the weight of that settle into her understanding and reconfigure everything. Not a momentary breach, a permanent gateway, a standing door between their dimension and the wellspring, powered by the bond between her and Harry, sustained by their emotional connection. "He doesn't just want to look," she murmured. "He wants to build a bridge and keep it open, using us as the power source, for as long as we live." They looked at each other across the siphon. The bond pulsed between them, and for once, its warmth felt ominous rather than comforting, because the warmth was the fuel, and the deeper it burned, the more useful they became to a man who wanted to tear a hole in reality. "We need to document everything and leave," Wednesday said. "Blackwood will notice if the lock has been tampered with. He'll know someone was here. Let him know, let him panic." Number, Wednesday's voice was sharp. "Not yet. Panic makes him unpredictable. I want him comfortable. I want him confident. I want him so convinced that his plan is working that he doesn't see us coming until we're already there." Harry looked at her. She could feel his instinct pushing against her strategy. He was a fighter, a charger, someone who met threats head-on. The idea of letting Blackwood operate freely went against every fiber of his being. "Trust me," Wednesday said. The words surprised her. She wasn't sure she'd ever said them to anyone outside her family. Harry held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, we do it your way." They climbed back up the spiral staircase. Wednesday resealed the trapdoor with a spell of her own, not the same wardlock, but a subtle monitoring enchantment that would alert her if anyone opened the door again. Blackwood would come back. When he did, she'd know. They emerged from the greenhouse into morning light that felt too bright after the blue glow of the sub-basement. The campus was waking up around them, students crossing the quad, the distant sound of a bell marking the 15-minute warning for first period. Addams, Potter, Enid was running toward them across the quad, and she was not alone. Bianca Barclay was with her, which was unusual because Bianca and Enid occupied very different social orbits. Bianca's face was set in an expression that Wednesday recognized, the careful mask of someone who was about to deliver bad news and wanted to control the delivery. "What?" Wednesday said. "Blackwood's been reinstated," Bianca said. "Weems got overruled. The Board of Governors held an emergency session this morning, 6 a.m., and voted to lift his suspension. He's back in the classroom as of 9 o'clock. Wednesday's jaw tightened. Not visibly, she had better control than that, but Harry felt it through the bond, a flash of cold fury that prickled across his skin. "On what grounds?" Harry asked. "Academic freedom clause." He argued that the demonstration was an approved educational event and that the stone's activation was an unforeseeable consequence. The board bought it. Bianca's voice dripped with contempt. Or they were told to buy it. 3 of the 7 board members have financial ties to old European families. I checked. Vain's network, Wednesday said. Almost certainly. Isald didn't need to be at Nevermore to exert pressure. She just needed a phone and a list of people who owed her favors. Wednesday stood in the middle of the quad and processed. Blackwood was reinstated. Institutional Avenue was closed. They couldn't rely on the school to remove him. The siphon was in the sub-basement, half-built, actively feeding on ambient magic. Isald Vain was coming, backed by old money and old power and old grudges. The bond was growing stronger by the hour, which was exactly what their enemies wanted. 3 enemies. Blackwood, Isald, the bond, 2 of them were working together. One was inside them. "I need to talk to Blackwood," Wednesday said. Everyone looked at her. Directly. "In person. I need to look him in the eyes and have a conversation, and I need to do it before Isald arrives." "Why?" Harry asked, and she could feel his concern through the bond, not the protective, smothering kind, but the sharp, tactical kind. He wasn't worried she couldn't handle it. He was worried she was about to do something bold without telling him the full plan. Because Blackwood is the weak link, not in capability and motivation. He wants the wellspring. He wants discovery. He's a true believer. True believers can be reasoned with, redirected, or, if necessary, broken. But first, I need to understand exactly what he believes. And you're going to get that from a conversation. I'm going to get that from a conversation amplified by a psychic bond that lets me read microexpressions, emotional fluctuations, and involuntary magical responses in real time. She looked at Harry. "I need you nearby, within the 50-foot radius. The bond's amplification of my perception is strongest when you're close and actively channeling. You want me to power your human lie detector. I want you to stand in the hallway outside Blackwood's office and do what you did in the catacombs. Let your magic breathe. I'll handle the rest." Harry considered this for exactly 2 seconds. "Fine, but if he threatens you, then I'll handle that too. I don't need rescue, Harry. I need proximity." She used his first name. She watched it register, the slight shift in his expression, the pulse in the bond. She'd done it deliberately, and they both knew it. "Okay," he said. "Let's go talk to the mad scientist." Blackwood's office was on the 2nd floor of the Arcane Studies wing, a room Wednesday had broken into twice before and could navigate in the dark. The door was closed. She knocked, a concession she made only because she wanted the conversation to begin on terms that felt normal, familiar, unthreatening. Blackwood would be on guard after last night. She needed him to lower that guard. Harry positioned himself in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his magic already bleeding outward, a slow, invisible expansion of power that filled the corridor like heat from a radiator. Wednesday felt the bond respond, her perceptive abilities sharpening until the world looked like a high-resolution photograph, every detail crisp, every shadow readable. "Come in," Blackwood called. She entered, closed the door behind her. The office was as she remembered it. Bookshelves covering every wall, artifacts on display shelves, a desk that was organized with military precision. Blackwood sat behind it in his usual chair, and he looked exactly like a man who had been suspended and reinstated within the same 12-hour period, which was to say he looked tired around the edges but fundamentally unshaken. "Miss Addams." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." She sat. Not because he'd offered, but because sitting projected calm, and calm was the weapon she'd chosen for this encounter. "Congratulations on your reinstatement," she said. The board's decision was impressively quick, almost as if it had been arranged in advance. Blackwood's right hand twitched. Microexpression, guilt, quickly suppressed. Wednesday cataloged it. "I appreciate your directness," he said. "It's one of your finest qualities." "You don't get to appreciate my qualities. You violated them. My autonomy, my choice, my bodily sovereignty, you bypassed all of it for an experiment. I'm not here for an apology because I don't value apologies from people who would do the same thing again. I'm here because I want to understand why. I explained why last night. You explained the what. The wellspring, the dimensional gateway, the amplification of magical knowledge. You didn't explain the why, the personal why. Why does Aldrich Blackwood, tenured professor, published researcher, respected authority in his field, risk everything to punch a hole in reality?" Blackwood leaned back in his chair. Wednesday watched his face with Bond-amplified precision and saw the moment he decided to be honest, a relaxation of the muscles around his eyes, a slight forward tilt of his chin. People's bodies decided things before their minds did. She'd always known that. Now she could see it happening in real time, every micro-movement a telegraph of intention. "Because I watched my daughter die of a magical disease that we don't understand because the knowledge to understand it was lost when the last bridge to the wellspring collapsed 1,000 years ago." The room was very quiet. Wednesday hadn't known about a daughter. The information wasn't in any file she'd accessed, any dossier she'd compiled. Blackwood had buried it deep. "Her name was Alina," he said. "She was 7. She had a condition called magical core fragmentation. The core of her magical ability was unstable, shedding energy faster than her body could contain it. It's rare, incurable with current knowledge. She deteriorated over 2 years. I watched her lose the ability to cast spells, then the ability to move, then the ability to speak, then the ability to breathe." His hands were flat on the desk, steady. This was a pain he'd lived with long enough to control, but Wednesday saw through the Bond's amplification, through the razor clarity of her enhanced perception, that the control was a shell around something molten. "I'm sorry about your daughter," Wednesday said, and meant it. "That changes nothing." "I know." Blackwood's voice was raw. "I know it doesn't justify what I did. I'm not asking for justification. You asked me why, and I'm telling you. Alina died because we lacked knowledge. The wellspring holds that knowledge, the foundational understanding of magical theory that would let us cure diseases like hers, prevent conditions we currently can't even diagnose. I've spent 20 years trying to reach it. The bond was the last piece. The bond was 2 people's lives, my life, Harry's life. I know that too." He met her eyes, and Wednesday saw something she hadn't expected, genuine conflict. Not the easy villainy of someone who didn't care, but the tormented compromise of someone who did care and had acted anyway. "I told myself it was worth it, the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. I told myself the bond wasn't harmful, it doesn't hurt you, it amplifies you, it binds us, without consent, for life. The fact that the chains are comfortable doesn't make them less than chains." Blackwood flinched, actually flinched. Wednesday saw it ripple through his body, the physical impact of her words hitting a nerve he hadn't adequately protected. She stood. She'd gotten what she came for. The motivation was real. The grief was real. And that made Blackwood more dangerous than a simple villain because he had a reason that sounded like righteousness, and people with righteous reasons didn't stop. "2 more questions," she said. "Then I'm leaving." "Ask." "The siphon. Is it functional?" A long pause. "Not yet, it needs 3 more components. I'm expecting them within the week." "And Isald Vain, is she your partner or your patron?" Blackwood's expression shifted, another recalculation, another reassessment of how much Wednesday knew. She's my financier. The PRC funded my research in exchange for access to the wellspring if and when I succeeded. But our goals are not the same. She doesn't care about knowledge. She cares about power specifically, about ensuring that the old families control whatever comes through the gateway. And you think you can outmaneuver her. I think that once the gateway is open, the question of control becomes academic. The wellspring isn't a resource to be hoarded, it's a fundamental force. It would be like trying to hoard gravity. People have tried to hoard gravity, they were called kings. She walked to the door. Wednesday, Blackwood's voice stopped her. The bond will keep growing. The amplification you've already experienced is early stage. As your emotional connection to Harry deepens, and it will, the bond ensures it, your abilities will continue to expand. Within weeks, your psychic range will cover the entire eastern seaboard. Within months, you'll be able to see across continents. The bond isn't a cage, it's an evolution. Wednesday opened the door. Harry was in the hallway, exactly where she'd left him, his magic still radiating in that controlled, ambient way that made the air taste electric. He looked at her face and read it instantly, the bond and his own intelligence combining to give him a faster read on her emotional state than anyone else had ever managed. "Got what you needed?" he asked. "I got what I needed and several things I didn't want." She walked past him. He fell into step. His daughter died, a magical disease. He's trying to access the wellspring because he believes the knowledge to cure such diseases exists there. Harry was quiet for several strides. That's worse. It's worse because it makes him sympathetic, and sympathy is a strategic weakness I can't afford. Wednesday paused at the top of the staircase. He also confirmed that the siphon is nearly complete, 3 more components arriving within the week, which means our timeline just compressed. And Isald. He sees her as a financier he can outmaneuver. She almost certainly sees him as a tool she can discard. They're both wrong about each other, which creates an exploitable instability in their alliance. You want to break them apart. I want to make them break themselves apart. There's a difference. The first requires effort. The second requires patience and a well-placed piece of information. They descended the stairs and emerged into the main hall, where the between-classes crush of students flowed around them like water around stones. Wednesday navigated the crowd without slowing, the students parting for her instinctively, a phenomenon she'd noticed years ago and never questioned, because it seemed only natural that people would clear the path of someone who radiated the energy of a blade being drawn. Harry kept pace beside her, and she caught a few of the glances directed their way, less curious than yesterday, more assessing. The student body was forming opinions. She could feel it in the social currents the way she could feel weather changes in her joints. Some of them were envious. Some were afraid. Some were fascinated by the spectacle of 2 powerful people bound together against their will, which was essentially the premise of every dramatic narrative since the Greeks, and teenagers loved drama almost as much as they loved complaining about it. Addams. Potter. The voice came from behind them, and it belonged to someone Wednesday hadn't expected to encounter in the main hall at this hour. A student she'd classified as peripheral, not uninteresting, but not directly relevant to her current concerns. Xavier Thorpe stood in the middle of the hallway with his artist's hands shoved in his pockets and an expression that was trying very hard to look casual and failing comprehensively. He'd been watching them. Wednesday could see it in his posture, the tense shoulders, the slightly too direct eye contact, the way his weight was on the balls of his feet as if he might need to move quickly. "Xavier," Wednesday said, "you're blocking traffic. Can we talk 5 minutes? It's important." Wednesday assessed. Xavier was an artist, a psychic, and an occasional complication in her personal life that she had firmly categorized as resolved. His abilities were precognitive in nature. He drew things before they happened. It was an unreliable gift, inconsistent and uncontrolled, but when it hit, it hit. "Walk with us," she said. "Talk while walking. I don't stop moving for anyone." Xavier fell into step on her left side, the side Harry wasn't on, Wednesday noticed, with the spatial awareness of someone who understood territory even if he'd never articulated it that way. "I drew something last night," Xavier said. After the bonding, I went back to my room and I couldn't sleep and I started sketching and look, this has happened before, you know how it works. Sometimes I draw things that are just things and sometimes I draw things that are things. Show me. Xavier pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He opened it and held it out, and Wednesday took it and stopped walking despite her own rule because what she saw demanded her full attention. The drawing was in charcoal, Xavier's preferred medium, and it was rendered with the manic precision of someone channeling rather than creating. It showed Nevermore Academy from above, a bird's-eye view of the campus, every building rendered in accurate detail. But the campus was wrong. The quad was shattered. The main building's roof was caved in. The greenhouse, the condemned one, the one with the siphon in its basement, was the epicenter of a blast pattern that radiated outward in concentric rings of destruction. And in the sky above the ruined school there was a hole. Not a cloud formation, not a storm, a hole. A ragged tear in the fabric of the sky itself, and through it something was reaching. Something vast, something made of angles that didn't exist in three-dimensional space, something that had too many limbs or no limbs at all depending on how you looked at it. At the bottom of the drawing, two figures stood in the ruins. A girl with dark braids, a boy with a scar. They were facing the thing in the sky. They were holding hands. Wednesday stared at the drawing for 10 seconds. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. When? She asked. I don't know. My visions don't come with timestamps, but it felt soon. The energy it felt like pressure, like something building. Wednesday looked at Harry. He'd seen the drawing over her shoulder, and his face had gone still in the way it went still when something serious demanded processing. The bond between them was tight, vibrating with shared alarm. Thank you, Xavier, Wednesday said. This is useful. Useful? Wednesday, that's the school being destroyed by something from another dimension. Yes. And now I know what it looks like, which means I can prevent it. Information is prevention. You've given me both. Xavier looked at her like she was insane, which was a look Wednesday received regularly and had stopped finding meaningful. He glanced at Harry, perhaps looking for a more human reaction. She's right, Harry said. Knowing is better than not knowing, always, even when what you know is terrible. Xavier opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once and walked away. He didn't look back, and Wednesday felt a brief, clinical appreciation for the way he handled the interaction. No drama, no lingering, no attempt to insert himself further into the situation. He delivered his intelligence and withdrawn, professional, she approved. The drawing confirms my vision, Wednesday said as they resumed walking. Nevermore burns, the greenhouse is the epicenter. The siphon activates, the gateway opens, and something comes through. The two figures at the bottom, that was us. Holding hands, which suggests the bond is involved in whatever happens next, either as the cause or the solution. Could be both. Could be both, Wednesday agreed. But I'd prefer to be the solution. I've been the cause of enough catastrophes. They reached the tower suite and Wednesday spread Xavier's drawing on the common room table next to her own notes, the supply chain analysis and things surveillance reports. The investigation was building not into a neat picture because real investigations were never neat but into a comprehensible pattern. Blackwood's obsession, Isald's ambition, the siphon, the wellspring, the thing in the sky that wanted through. We need allies, Harry said. He was standing at the window looking out at the campus that Xavier had drawn in ruins. We can't handle all of this alone. We're not alone, we have Thing. Thing saluted from the mantelpiece. We need more than Thing. Enid, Bianca, people with abilities and stakes in the outcome. Wednesday resisted this instinctively. She worked alone. She had always worked alone. Other people were variables, and variables were Wednesday. Harry turned from the window. I tried to do everything alone once, for years. I pushed away friends, refused help, convinced myself that my problems were mine to carry. People died because of it. Not because they helped me, because I didn't let them help me when they could have. She met his eyes. Through the bond, she felt the weight of that statement, not as an abstract sentiment, but as a lived truth carried like a scar. He wasn't being philosophical. He was speaking from a wound. Enid can cover social intelligence. She knows everyone, hears everything, and people tell her things they'd never tell us because she's non-threatening. Bianca has political connections and siren abilities that are useful in negotiations, and we can trust them because their interests align with ours. They live at this school. If it burns, they burn with it. Wednesday thought about this for 30 seconds. It was 30 seconds longer than she usually spent considering other people's input, and Harry noticed, and she felt his quiet satisfaction through the bond, and she resented it. "Fine," she said, "but I run the operation. No committees, no votes, no discussion-based decision-making. I set the strategy, I assign the tasks, and if anyone deviates from the plan, I will be extremely unpleasant about it. That's just how you are normally." "Yes. So imagine how unpleasant I'd be if I were trying." Enid arrived first because Enid was always available when Wednesday needed her, a quality that Wednesday had never acknowledged but had relied upon more than she would admit. Bianca arrived second because Bianca needed to be asked in a way that respected her autonomy and status, and Wednesday had asked Thing to deliver the invitation, which Bianca correctly interpreted as a sign of unusual respect from Wednesday, which it was. They gathered in the tower suite. Wednesday laid out the evidence: the siphon, the supply chain, Blackwood's motivation, Isald's arrival, Xavier's prophetic drawing. She presented it the way she presented everything, clearly, completely, and without sugar. Enid's reaction was horror, processed through her characteristic openness, wide eyes, hands over her mouth, a whispered "oh my God" that was genuine rather than performative. Bianca's reaction was cold fury, processed through political calculation, her mind already working the angles, assessing leverage, identifying vulnerabilities. "The 3 board members with Vain connections," Bianca said immediately. "I know 2 of them personally. Patricia Montague is Isald's second cousin. Aldous Feng has investment ties to 3 Vain-controlled funds. If we can prove the board vote was influenced, we can challenge Blackwood's reinstatement through the appeals process." "That takes weeks," Wednesday said. "We don't have weeks. It takes weeks if you do it legitimately. I'm a siren. Give me 20 minutes with Patricia Montague and I'll have a signed confession." Wednesday looked at Bianca with renewed appreciation. "I thought you'd stopped using your abilities for manipulation." "I stopped using them for personal gain. Preventing the school from being destroyed by an interdimensional nightmare is not personal gain, it's survival. Flexible about methods when survival is involved." "I knew I tolerated you for a reason," Bianca almost smiled. Highest praise from Wednesday Addams. "Enid," Wednesday continued, "I need the student body managed. When Isald Vain arrives, and she will arrive within 72 hours, she'll try to create a narrative. The concerned elder stateswoman protecting magical tradition. I need that narrative dead on arrival. I need the students to see her for what she is, a power broker with an agenda." Enid nodded. "I can do that. I'll talk to the pack. The wolves have a lot of influence in the younger years, and Yoko's been wanting to do something since last night. The vampires follow Yoko, and Yoko follows whoever's winning. Then make sure we're winning." Wednesday assigned tasks with surgical efficiency. Bianca would work the political angle, board members, institutional leverage, legal challenges. Enid would manage the social landscape, student opinion, rumor control, alliance building. Harry and Wednesday would continue investigating the siphon, monitor Blackwood, and prepare for Isald's arrival. Thing would do what Thing did best, go places he shouldn't be and report back. When Enid and Bianca left, the suite was quiet. Late afternoon light slanted through the tower windows. Wednesday stood at the table, looking at the accumulated evidence, and felt something she identified as satisfaction. The pieces were coming together. The picture was forming. The enemy was clear, the stakes were defined, and the plan was in motion. Harry made more coffee, his answer to most situations. Wednesday was learning, and she was learning a lot of things about Harry Potter that she hadn't expected to learn and wasn't sure what to do with. He hummed while he worked, off-key, completely unself-conscious. It was the habit of someone who had spent too much time in silence and had decided at some point to fill it himself. "You hum," she said. "Sorry, I'll stop." "I didn't ask you to stop, I made an observation." Harry looked at her, the bond pulsed. Was that permission to keep humming? It was a statement that I notice things, draw whatever conclusions you wish. He kept humming. Wednesday didn't mind. She was almost certain she didn't mind. She was at least 70% sure. The evening passed in productive quiet. Wednesday worked on her laptop. Harry read through more Bond literature. They exchanged findings periodically, short, efficient conversations that the Bond rewarded with small pulses of warmth, because apparently even utilitarian cooperation counted as emotional resonance, and the Bond wasn't picky about how it got its fix. At 10 p.m., Wednesday's monitoring enchantment on the greenhouse trapdoor activated. She felt it like a tap on the shoulder, a subtle magical ping that told her someone had opened the door. She closed her laptop. "Blackwood's in the sub-basement," she said. Harry set down his book. Now. They looked at each other. The Bond hummed between them, and in its vibration, Wednesday felt something that wasn't warmth and wasn't cold and wasn't anything she had a name for. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of a confrontation with someone who would stand at the edge with you. "Let's go," she said. They went. The campus at 10 p.m. was quiet in the specific way that Nevermore was quiet, not empty, because a school full of supernatural beings never truly emptied, but muted, the daytime chaos replaced by nighttime murmurs. Vampires were active, moving in their quick, silent way. A pair of werewolves sat on the quad benches, their eyes catching moonlight. Somewhere, someone was playing a cello badly, and Wednesday felt a pang of professional irritation. They reached the greenhouse. The caution tape was undisturbed. Blackwood had entered another way. Wednesday found the second entrance in 30 seconds, because she'd memorized the greenhouse's blueprint during her first week at Nevermore. A side door partially concealed by overgrown ivy, leading to a service corridor that connected to the sub-basement via an older, steeper staircase. They descended silently. Harry's magic was pulled tight against his body, compressed, invisible. He was hiding his signature, Wednesday realized, the way a predator masks its scent. She followed suit, pulling her psychic presence inward, making herself small and undetectable. Voices drifted up the stairwell. Blackwood's voice. And another, a woman's. A voice Wednesday recognized from the vision, the lip-read words, the clipped French accent. Isald Vain was already at Nevermore. She'd come a day earlier than Wednesday's estimate. The realization hit like ice water. Wednesday adjusted, she always adjusted, she was built for adaptation, but the timeline compression changed things. They'd planned for 72 hours. They had 0. Wednesday held up a hand. Harry stopped. They were on the staircase, hidden by the curve of the wall, close enough to hear but not to see. "Siphon is performing within parameters," Blackwood was saying. "The ambient energy absorption rate confirms the theoretical model. Once the final components are installed, when?" Isald's voice was clipped, impatient. Specifically, Aldrich, when will the siphon be operational? 3 days, I'm waiting on the last 3 crystals. They're in transit from the Luxembourg facility. Unacceptable. I want it operational in 24 hours. That's not possible. The crystals need to be. I've brought my own, modified, more efficient than what you ordered. My team can have them installed by morning. A long silence. Wednesday felt Blackwood's displeasure through the ambient magic, a subtle shift in the room's energy that her amplified senses picked up like a seismograph registering a tremor. "You've been making modifications without consulting me," Blackwood said. "I've been making improvements. The original design was elegant but slow. My engineers have optimized the energy channeling pathways. We can increase the siphon's output by 40%. 40% would destabilize the dimensional barrier before the gateway can be properly calibrated. You get a breach, not a door. The difference is academic, Aldrich. A breach serves my purposes just as well as a door serves yours." Another silence. Longer. Wednesday could feel the alliance cracking, hairline fractures in the surface of their partnership, stress lines that had been there from the beginning but were now visible under pressure. "Isald," Blackwood's voice had changed. Harder. "We agreed. A stable, controlled gateway, not a breach. A breach is uncontrollable, unpredictable, dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous. You told me that once, when you were begging for funding. I wasn't begging. You were on your knees, Aldrich, figuratively, telling me about your daughter, about the knowledge lost, about the great work that needed doing. I gave you everything you asked for, money, materials, political cover, and now you're telling me that my timeline is unacceptable. I'm telling you that your timeline will get people killed. People die every day. The question is whether their deaths serve a purpose. Isald's voice was perfectly calm, perfectly cold, the voice of someone who had made peace with her own ruthlessness so long ago that it no longer required justification. The bond is active. The subjects are powerful. The siphon is ready, or it will be by morning. The sable equinox's residual energy is still elevated. If we wait, the window closes. If we act now, we change the world. We could end it. Then it wasn't worth saving. Wednesday had heard enough. She reached for Harry through the bond, not physically, but through the connection itself, pushing an intention toward him. Wait, listen, we need more. She felt him receive it, felt his acknowledgement pulse back. The bond was becoming a communication channel, and she filed that development for later examination. There's another problem, Blackwood said below them. The students, Addams and Potter, they're not passive. She's already been to my office. She's already deduced the partnership. And his power. A pause. Isald, I've studied magical theory my entire career. I've never encountered a signature like Harry Potter's. The bond is amplifying both of them beyond any model I've built. If they oppose the activation, they won't have the opportunity to oppose it. My team has prepared countermeasures. What kind of countermeasures? The kind that ensure cooperation, willing or otherwise. The temperature in the stairwell dropped. Not Harry's doing this time, Wednesday's. Her anger was a physical thing, a cold front moving through the narrow space, frosting the stone walls. Blackwood's voice, when it came again, was strained. You said no one would be harmed. I said the bond wouldn't harm them. The bond won't. My countermeasures are separate from the bond. Isald, this is not a negotiation, Aldrich. It stopped being a negotiation when I invested 4 million galleons in your obsession. You will complete the siphon. I will handle the subjects. And by this time tomorrow, the wellspring will be open. Footsteps, moving toward the staircase. Wednesday grabbed Harry's arm and pulled him backward up the stairs, moving fast and silent. They cleared the service corridor, exited through the side door, and didn't stop moving until they were behind the botanical gardens, hidden in the shadow of a massive oak tree, breathing hard. 24 hours, Harry said. She has countermeasures, a team, modified crystals that could turn the siphon into a bomb. Wednesday's mind was racing, not panicking, racing. Processing options at a speed that the bond was fueling. Her enhanced cognition chewing through scenarios the way Harry's magic chewed through stone. We can't wait for the political strategy to play out. Bianca's board challenged the institutional channels. They're useless now. Agreed. We need to act directly. What does that look like? Wednesday leaned against the oak tree and closed her eyes. Through the bond, she reached for the psychic range that had let her see the entire school from the catacombs. Harry felt what she was doing and responded. His magic expanded outward, a silent bloom of power that hit the bond like fuel hitting fire, and Wednesday's perception erupted. She saw the greenhouse sub-basement. Isald's team, 5 people, heavily warded, carrying cases of equipment. She saw the modified crystals, darker than the originals, pulsing with an energy that felt wrong, unstable, the magical equivalent of nitroglycerin. She saw the siphon, and she saw what Isald's modifications would do to it. The careful calibration that Blackwood had built would be overridden. The channeling pathways forced open wider than they were designed to handle, creating not a door but a wound in dimensional space. She pushed further. She saw Blackwood, standing alone in the sub-basement, watching Isald's teamwork with the expression of a man watching his life's work being hijacked, and trying to calculate whether the destination was worth the destruction of the vehicle. She saw Isald on a phone speaking to someone. More people coming to Nevermore, not researchers, not diplomats, soldiers, private security, magical combat specialists, a dozen of them arriving from a staging point in the town. "She's bringing an army," Wednesday breathed. Her eyes snapped open. 12 combat specialists staging in the town. They'll be on campus by morning. The countermeasures. The countermeasures are us being forcibly subdued while the siphon uses our bond energy to rip open a hole in reality. Wednesday's voice was flat, controlled, and absolutely certain. She doesn't need our cooperation. She just needs our proximity to the siphon. The bond generates energy passively, more when we're emotionally engaged, but it outputs a baseline even at rest. If she can get us within range of the siphon and keep us there, it'll feed on us whether we want it to or not. Like the sample it took from you this morning. It knows our signature now. It's tuned to us. Precisely. They stood in the shadow of the oak tree and looked at each other. The moon was up. It lit Harry's face in silver and shadow, and the scar on his forehead was very visible, that old wound that marked him as someone who had survived the unsurvivable. And Wednesday felt the bond pulse between them with something that wasn't warmth and wasn't cold and wasn't anything she could dismiss as the artifact's influence because it felt too much like her own heart. "We have until morning," she said. "Here's what we're going to do," she told him. And Harry Potter, who had faced dark lords and government corruption and his own death, listened to Wednesday Addams lay out a plan and felt, through the bond, something he recognized from the very best moments of his life. The absolute certainty that the person beside him was equal to the challenge. The night deepened around them, and they moved through it together, and the bond between them burned steady and strong, and Nevermore Academy slept while its two most dangerous students prepared for war. They didn't sleep, neither of them even tried. There was too much to do and not enough time to do it, and Wednesday Addams did not waste time on biological necessities when the alternative was victory. By midnight, they had assembled their forces. Enid, pulled from bed and vibrating with a combination of fear and ferocious loyalty, had mobilized the wolf pack, 6 werewolves who were young but strong, and who took the news that their school was under threat with the snarling outrage that was their birthright. Bianca had contacted her siren network, 3 sirens with combat training, and a political grudge against the old families that went back generations. Yoko contributed herself and 2 other vampires whose speed and night vision would be critical in the hours ahead. Wednesday briefed them in the tower suite. 14 people in a room built for 2, and she stood before them and spoke with the cold precision of a general who had already calculated the odds and decided that odds were for people who couldn't guarantee outcomes. Isald Vain has brought a strike team to Nevermore. 12 magical combat specialists, staging in the town, arriving on campus at dawn. Their objective is to seize control of the siphon device in the greenhouse sub-basement, forcibly restrain Harry and me within its operational radius, and activate a dimensional breach. If they succeed, something comes through the breach, something we've been warned about through multiple prophetic channels, and Nevermore is destroyed. The room was silent. Wednesday felt their fear, their anger, their resolve. She didn't soften the reality. They deserved the truth. Our objective is to prevent activation. My plan has 3 phases. Phase 1. Enid's wolves and Yoko's vampires establish a perimeter around the greenhouse. You are not engaging the strike team. You are early warning. The moment they approach, you signal. Phase 2. Bianca and her sirens intercept the strike team at the perimeter. Use your abilities to slow them, confuse them, redirect them. Don't fight, delay. Every minute you give us is a minute we use. Phase 3. Harry and I enter the sub-basement and neutralize the siphon. Neutralize how? Yoko asked. Her dark eyes were sharp. You said magic feeds it. Magic does feed it. We're not going to use magic. Wednesday pulled her obsidian blade from its sheath. Firelight ran along the edge. We're going to use this. The siphon's structural integrity depends on the quintessence gel channels. The gel is a magical substance, but the channels themselves are physical, metal and crystal. Disrupt the channels, the gel leaks and the siphon loses coherence. I can cut through the channel housings. Harry will handle any resistance we encounter inside. Without magic? Harry asked. He'd been quiet during the briefing, listening, assessing. Now his voice carried a note of dry amusement. You want me to fight trained combat specialists without using magic inside a device that eats magic. I want you to use magic selectively. Outside the siphon's radius, roughly 10 feet from the device, your abilities are unaffected. Inside the radius, every spell you cast feeds the machine. So fight smart, keep your distance. Use environmental attacks, transmute the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Shape the battlefield instead of throwing spells at people. Harry nodded slowly. I can do that. I know you can, that's why I'm not worried. The words landed with a weight that surprised both of them. Wednesday felt the bond respond, a deep, resonant pulse that wasn't warmth and wasn't satisfaction, but was something closer to recognition. The recognition of one warrior by another. The acknowledgement that trust, once given, changes the landscape of a battle. She looked away from him and addressed the room. Move out at 4 a.m. Positions by 5. The strike team will arrive at dawn. We'll be ready. They dispersed. Enid hugged Wednesday before she left, a brief, fierce embrace that Wednesday tolerated because Enid needed it and because in the dark privacy of her own heart so did she. The suite emptied. Wednesday and Harry stood alone. The plan was set. The forces were deployed. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. You should eat, Harry said. And don't tell me food is for people who aren't strategizing. You've been running on coffee for 41 hours and you're going to fight trained killers in approximately 6 hours. I don't, Wednesday. He walked to the kitchen counter. Let me make you something, not because you need to be taken care of, because eating before battle is what soldiers do and you're a soldier, and soldiers who don't eat die stupid, preventable deaths. She sat at the table. He cooked. Eggs, toast, bacon, simple, fast, efficient. He moved around the kitchen with the ease of someone who found comfort in the act of feeding others, and Wednesday watched him and felt the bond settle into something quiet and steady between them. You cooked for your friends, she said. During the war. Before the war. After. During when we could. My friend Hermione couldn't cook to save her life. Ron could but wouldn't, so it was me. He plated the food and set it in front of her. Cooking is the opposite of fighting. It's building something instead of destroying something. I needed that, still do. Wednesday ate. The food was good. She didn't say so, but Harry felt it through the bond, her grudging, private acknowledgement, and he smiled to himself and didn't push it. They ate in silence. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, and somewhere in the town below, 12 people with combat training and violent intent were preparing to assault a school. And in the greenhouse sub-basement, a device designed to tear open reality hummed quietly to itself, waiting for the power that would make it sing. Wednesday finished her food, set down her fork, looked at Harry. If this goes wrong tomorrow, she said, if the siphon activates despite everything, if something comes through. It won't. If it does, Xavier's drawing showed us standing in the ruins, holding hands. If that's how it ends, if the bond is the weapon that closes the breach, I need you to know that I'll do whatever's necessary, without hesitation. Harry met her eyes, green and dark. The bond hummed between them, and in its vibration was everything they hadn't said and might never say, because they were who they were and words like these didn't come naturally to either of them. So will I, he said. Without hesitation. They looked at each other across the table, across the bond, across the strange and impossible space between two people who hadn't chosen each other but were choosing moment by moment to stand together. Wednesday stood. 4 a.m. Get some rest if you can. You won't. Number I have preparations to make. Wednesday. She stopped, turned. Harry was still sitting at the table. His hands were flat on the surface, his posture open. And his expression was something she couldn't read, or rather, something she could read perfectly through the bond, but chose not to examine too closely because the translation of what she felt would require her to use words she wasn't ready for. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said, I'm glad it was you. He'd said it before, the first night. But it landed differently now, heavier, more certain, weighted with 2 days of fighting together, planning together, trusting each other in the small and large ways that the bond demanded and that they'd chosen to give. You said that already, she said. I'll keep saying it until you believe me. She held his gaze. The bond burned between them and she let it because the bond wanted authenticity, and this wordless, complicated, terrifying thing between them was the most authentic thing she'd felt in her life. "Good night, Harry," she said. His first name. A choice. "Good night, Wednesday." She went to her room. She did not sleep. She sharpened her blade, checked her equipment, reviewed her plans, and waited for dawn. And the bond burned steady in her chest, and it felt like a heartbeat that belonged to both of them, and she did not name what it was, but she held it close, and she let it warm her through the long, dark hours before the war. Chapter 4. Empire of Thorns. Dawn came to Nevermore the way it always did, gray and reluctant, as if the sun had looked at the school and decided it wasn't worth the effort. Wednesday appreciated the aesthetic. She'd been awake for 53 hours. She'd sharpened her blade twice, and she was standing at the tower window watching the tree line when Harry emerged from his room at 3:47 a.m., 13 minutes ahead of schedule. He was dressed for a fight. Not in robes, not in a school uniform, dark trousers, boots, a black long-sleeved shirt with the sleeves already pushed to his elbows. He looked like he'd slept for exactly 2 hours and gotten more from those 2 hours than most people got from 8, which Wednesday suspected was a survival adaptation from years of never knowing when the next crisis would interrupt his rest. "They're moving," Wednesday said without turning from the window. Her psychic sense, even without Harry's active amplification, was sharp enough now to detect large concentrations of magical energy within a mile radius. "The strike team broke camp 10 minutes ago. They're approaching from the northeast through the forest. 12 signatures, just as I projected." Harry moved to the window beside her. He didn't touch her, but his proximity activated the bond's amplification, and Wednesday's perception sharpened like a lens being focused. She could see them now, 12 figures moving through the trees in a staggered formation, professional, silent, warded against detection by conventional magical means. They hadn't counted on being detected by unconventional ones. "Formation suggests military training," Harry said. He was reading the same picture she was, interpreting movement patterns through the tactical lens of someone who'd commanded soldiers in a war. "Two-person fire teams, advance and cover pattern. These aren't thugs." Isald spent real money on this. Real money for a real objective. She's not playing. Neither are we. Wednesday turned from the window. She checked her blade, obsidian edge sharp enough to split a photon, balanced perfectly, the enchantments humming in a frequency only she could hear. She checked the 3 additional items she'd prepared overnight. 2 flashbang capsules filled with powdered mandrake root, which produced a sonic blast that disrupted magical concentration, and a small glass vial containing a substance she'd synthesized from ingredients in her personal collection. The vial glowed faintly purple. Harry looked at it. "What's that?" "Quintessence neutralizer. I spent the last 3 hours creating it from the theoretical framework in Blackwood's own published papers. If the siphon is powered by quintessence gel, this should destabilize the gel's molecular structure on contact. Theoretical. I haven't tested it. The theory is sound. Blackwood's work is meticulous. If his equations are correct, this will turn the gel inert. If his equations are wrong, it might explode. Comforting. I didn't design it for comfort. I designed it for results." She pocketed the vial. "Let's move." They descended the tower stairs and stepped into the pre-dawn campus. The air was cold, sharp with the tail end of winter, and the sky was the color of a bruise, purple and gray with red bleeding at the horizon. Thing rode on Wednesday's shoulder, his fingers tense with anticipation. He'd spent the night running reconnaissance through Nevermore's ventilation system and had mapped every entry point that Isald's team might use. At the greenhouse perimeter, Enid was already in position. Her wolf pack was spread in a semicircle around the condemned structure, positioned behind walls, trees, and garden outcroppings. Enid herself crouched behind a stone planter, her eyes reflecting amber in the low light, not fully shifted but close, the wolf riding just below the surface. "All quiet so far," Enid whispered as Wednesday and Harry approached. "Yoko's team is on the east approach. Bianca's group is covering the main path from the forest." The strike team is 8 minutes out, Wednesday said. Northeast approach. They'll hit the forest edge in 5. Enid's amber eyes widened slightly, but she didn't question how Wednesday knew. She'd learned over a year of friendship that questioning Wednesday's information sources was both futile and time-consuming. Wednesday crouched beside her. The grass was wet with dew. The greenhouse loomed ahead of them, broken glass, rusted iron, the perfectly ordinary exterior of a building that contained a device capable of ending everything. Enid, when they reach the perimeter, hold your position. Signal only. 3 short howls. Got it? And Enid. Yeah. Wednesday looked at her roommate, her former roommate, her friend, the relentlessly bright presence that had inserted itself into her life with the subtlety of a werewolf at a tea party and had, against all probability, become someone she valued. If things go sideways, you run, take the pack and run. No heroics. Enid's jaw set. Wednesday, that's not a request. And I'm not agreeing to it. You can scare everyone else. You can't scare me. I've seen you in pajamas. Wednesday almost smiled. Almost. The muscles engaged, but she pulled them back at the last moment because there was a time and a place, and the time was now and the place was a battlefield. She moved on. Harry fell into step beside her. They circled the greenhouse, approached from the south, the service entrance, the one Blackwood used. The door was unlocked. Wednesday pushed it open with 2 fingers and felt the stale air of the interior wash over her. Inside, the greenhouse was dark. Broken glass crunched under their feet. Moonlight and the first gray of dawn filtered through the ruined roof, casting patterns on the floor that looked like shattered constellations. The trapdoor to the sub-basement was ahead. Wednesday's monitoring enchantment told her it had been opened and closed 17 times since last night. Isald's team had been busy. Wednesday stopped, put her hand on Harry's arm. Through the bond, she pushed a warning. Someone below, not Blackwood, guard. Harry nodded imperceptibly. His magic coiled, ready, held in check with the discipline of someone who understood that power without precision was just noise. Wednesday opened the trapdoor. The sub-basement had been transformed. The clean, clinical space she'd seen yesterday was now crowded with equipment, additional consoles, monitoring devices, cables of crystallized energy running across the floor like glowing veins. The siphon stood at the center, and it was complete. The 3 empty mounting points were filled with Isald's modified crystals, darker than the originals, almost black, pulsing with an energy that made Wednesday's teeth ache. A single guard stood at the base of the spiral staircase. Young, male, heavily warded, with the alert posture of someone who expected trouble and was trained to handle it. He turned at the sound of the trapdoor opening, his hand coming up with a wand already drawn. Harry moved, not with magic, with speed. He was down the spiral stairs in 3 strides, faster than the guard could track, and his hand closed around the wand and snapped it. Just snapped it like breaking a pencil, with a casual strength that spoke to the physical reality of Harry Potter. He wasn't just a wizard, he was someone who'd spent his childhood doing manual labor and his adolescence in physical combat, and his body was as much a weapon as his magic. The guard opened his mouth. Harry's other hand covered it, and his eyes locked onto the man's, and he said one word: sleep. It wasn't a spell. It wasn't a charm. It was an instruction delivered with enough magical intent behind it that the guard's nervous system simply complied. His eyes rolled back and he crumpled, and Harry lowered him to the floor with more gentleness than the situation required, because Harry Potter was apparently incapable of cruelty, even when cruelty would have been efficient. Wednesday noted this, filed it. She was building a comprehensive understanding of Harry's operational profile, and every data point mattered. How many more? Harry asked quietly. Wednesday extended her psychic sense into the sub-basement. The siphon's proximity made it harder. The device was pulling at her awareness, trying to sample her energy again, and she had to shield against it while simultaneously scanning the room. It was like trying to read in a windstorm. 2 more guards. One at the far exit, one patrolling the secondary chamber. There's a second room I didn't see before. Isald's had it excavated. It's behind the east wall. What's in it? Let's find out. They moved through the sub-basement, staying close to the walls, avoiding the siphon's operational radius. Wednesday could feel the device's pull, a magnetic tug on the bond, drawing their combined energy toward it. The closer they got, the stronger the pull. At the 10-foot radius she'd identified yesterday, it became actively uncomfortable, like walking against a current. Harry dealt with the second guard the same way he dealt with the first, physical interception. Snapped wand, commanded sleep. The man went down without a sound. The third guard was more alert. He was pacing the newly excavated chamber, and he turned at the wrong moment and caught sight of them and opened his mouth to shout. Wednesday threw the first mandrake flashbang. The capsule hit the stone floor at the guard's feet and detonated. The sound it produced wasn't a bang, it was a shriek, a compressed sonic blast at a frequency designed to disrupt magical concentration. The guard's shout died in his throat as the noise hit his nervous system. He staggered, his wand arm dropping, and Harry was on him before he could recover. 3 guards down. The sub-basement was clear. Wednesday turned her attention to the excavated chamber. It was rough, hastily carved from the stone behind the east wall, the cuts fresh, the air still dusty with rock powder. Inside, Isald had installed a secondary system, a ring of standing stones, or rather, standing crystals, arranged in a circle about 20 feet across. Each crystal was black like the modified siphon components, and each pulsed with the same wrong energy. At the center of the circle was a chair. It had restraints. Wednesday stared at it. The bond in her chest went cold. "That's for us," she said. "One of us." The restraints are designed to hold a bonded subject within the siphon's operational range, force-feed our energy into the device. Harry stood beside her, looking at the chair, and the air around him began to vibrate, not with heat, with something colder, harder, more compressed. His magic was responding to the threat, and the response wasn't a spell or a shield. It was a fundamental shift in the local magical field, as if reality itself was registering Harry Potter's anger and adjusting accordingly. "Wednesday," he said, and his voice was very quiet. "I want to break this." "Not yet. We need to, I know we need to be strategic. I know we need to wait. But I'm looking at a chair with restraints that was built to strap one of us down and drain our energy until either the dimension rips open or we die, and I want to break it." She put her hand on his arm, not for comfort, for grounding. Physical contact channeled the bond's energy more efficiently than proximity alone, and she needed him focused, not furious. "Break it after," she said. "Right now, I need you to look at those crystals and tell me if they match the ones in the siphon." Harry took a breath. The vibration in the air settled, not gone, but controlled, banked. He looked at the crystals with the analytical eye she was learning to rely on. Same base material, same modification, but these are arranged in a focusing pattern. They concentrate energy toward the center, toward the chair. He walked the perimeter of the circle, studying each crystal. This isn't just a restraint system, it's a secondary siphon, a booster. If Isald's team gets one of us in that chair and activates these crystals, the energy output would triple the siphon's throughput. Wednesday finished. Enough for an uncontrolled breach, not a door, a wound. And whatever's on the other side comes through the wound. They looked at each other across the chamber. The thing in Xavier's drawing, the vast, angular wrongness reaching through a hole in the sky. "We destroy the crystals first," Wednesday said. "Then the siphon. The neutralizer should handle the quintessence gel. You handle the crystal focusing ring." Physically, no magic within the siphon's radius. Can you break these without power?" Harry walked to the nearest crystal. He examined it. Then he drew his fist back and punched it. The crystal shattered. Not cracked, shattered, exploding outward in a spray of black fragments that dissolved into smoke before they hit the ground. Harry shook his hand once, a gesture that suggested the impact had hurt but not enough to matter. "Yeah," he said, "I can break them." He moved around the circle. One by one, with methodical physical violence, he destroyed the focusing crystals. Each one shattered under his fists, and each detonation sent a ripple of disrupted energy through the chamber. Wednesday felt the siphon react, a confused, grasping pulse, reaching for the energy sources it had been designed to channel, finding them being dismantled piece by piece. 7 down. 8. 9. 3 short howls pierced the dawn air above them. Enid's signal. The strike team had reached the perimeter. Wednesday's mind shifted gears with the speed of a transmission engaging. They were out of time for careful work. Harry had 3 crystals left in the focusing ring, and the siphon itself was still intact in the main chamber. "Finish them," she told Harry. "I'll handle the siphon." She didn't wait for his response. She moved back into the main chamber, pulling the glass vial from her pocket, and approached the siphon. The device loomed before her, complete, humming, hungry. Its crystals pulsed in an accelerating rhythm, as if it could feel the destruction of its secondary system and was compensating. The quintessence gel channels glowed with iridescent light, and the central core, the hollow chamber shaped like a cradle, was open, waiting for the energy that would set it loose. Wednesday uncapped the vial. "Theoretical," she muttered to herself, and poured the purple liquid directly into the primary quintessence gel channel. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then the gel screamed. Not literally, gel doesn't have vocal cords, but the sound it produced was close enough to screaming that Wednesday's nervous system didn't care about the distinction. The neutralizer hit the quintessence gel like acid hitting base, a violent chemical magical reaction that turned the iridescent gel opaque, then gray, then into a chalky solid that cracked and crumbled inside its channels. The siphon stuttered. Its hum faltered. The crystal's pulse went erratic, fast, slow, fast, like a heart in arrhythmia. Wednesday pulled her blade and drove it into the nearest gel channel housing, splitting the metal casing, and dead, neutralized gel poured onto the floor like dry sand. She hit the next channel, and the next. Moving fast, precise, each cut calculated to do maximum structural damage. The siphon shuddered. Sparks flew from its connection points. One of the modified crystals cracked down the middle with a sound like a gunshot. "Stop!" The voice came from the spiral staircase. Wednesday didn't stop. She cut the 4th channel. "I said stop!" A spell hit the blade and knocked it from her hand. Not a stunner, not an attack. A targeted disarming charm, precisely cast, surgical. Wednesday's hand stung from the impact and the blade clattered across the floor. Blackwood stood at the base of the stairs. His wand was drawn. His face was gray, his eyes wild, and he looked like a man watching his life's work die. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. His voice cracked. "The wellspring, the knowledge, Alina. Your daughter is dead, Professor." Wednesday's voice was flat and clear and merciless, because mercy was a luxury and she couldn't afford it. "And nothing on the other side of that gateway will bring her back. You know that. You've always known that. The wellspring isn't a library, it's a source of raw magical energy. It doesn't contain knowledge, it contains power. And power doesn't cure diseases. People cure diseases. People with the time and the funding and the will to do the research, none of which requires tearing a hole in reality." Blackwood's wand arm trembled. "You can't know that. I can see it. The bond shows me things, Professor. And what it shows me is that you built a door to something that doesn't have what you want, and the woman who funded you knows it, and she's been lying to you for 18 months because your grief made you easy to manipulate." The words hit Blackwood like physical blows. Wednesday saw each one land, saw the flinch, the denial, the desperate clinging to belief, and then slowly, like a building settling before it collapses, the recognition. She said, "Isald said the theoretical models proved. Isald's theoretical models prove whatever Isald needs them to prove. She doesn't want knowledge. She wants a weapon. A permanent breach powered by our bond that she can use as leverage against every magical government on Earth. You were the tool, Blackwood. You were her Blackwood the way Harry was the Ministry's Potter, a face to put on an agenda that was never yours." Blackwood lowered his wand. It happened slowly, as if the arm had forgotten how to move. He looked at the siphon, his creation, his 20 years of work, sparking and dying on the table, and something broke in his face. Not dramatically, quietly. The way things break when they've been under too much pressure for too long and finally, silently give. "She used Alina," he whispered. She told me she'd found references in the Vain family archives, lost medical texts from the Wellspring era. She said if I built the gateway, we could recover them. And you believed her because you needed to believe her. Grief is the most exploitable human weakness, and Isald Vain is an expert at exploitation. Harry emerged from the excavated chamber. His knuckles were bloody, the last 3 crystals had not gone quietly, but the focusing ring was destroyed. He took in the scene instantly. Wednesday, unarmed, facing Blackwood. Blackwood, wand lowered, broken, the siphon dying on its table. "The ring is gone," Harry said, "and the strike team is at the greenhouse. I can hear them." He could hear them because the greenhouse above them was no longer empty. Boots on glass, commands in low voices, professional, organized, moving toward the trapdoor. 12 incoming, Wednesday said. Her psychic sense was screaming now, the bond amplifying her awareness in the face of immediate danger. Armed, warded. They know we're here. The siphon's disruption would have triggered Isald's monitoring systems. Blackwood, Harry looked at the professor. You have a choice to make. Right now, help us or get out of the way. Blackwood stared at the dying siphon, at Harry, at Wednesday. His face was a map of competing griefs, his daughter, his work, his compromises, the slow accumulation of choices that had brought him to this sub-basement with blood on his hands and rubble at his feet. "The service exit," he said. "Behind the east wall panel. It leads to the catacombs. I installed it as an emergency escape route." "We're not running," Wednesday said. "I know you're not. But the siphon, even damaged, if Isald's team repairs the gel channels and installs fresh quintessence, they can have it operational again in an hour. You need to get it out of this building. It weighs 300 pounds. Not all of it. The central core." Blackwood crossed to the siphon and, with the practiced hands of its creator, detached the hollow central chamber, the cradle-shaped component that focused and directed the siphon's energy output. It was the size of a football, metallic and surprisingly light. Without this, the siphon is a collection of crystals and dead gel, expensive but useless. Take it. Wednesday took it. The core was warm in her hands, vibrating faintly with residual energy. "Why?" she asked Blackwood. "Why help us?" "Because you were right about everything, and because Alina would be ashamed of what I've become." His voice broke on his daughter's name. He pulled himself together with visible effort. "I'll delay them. I know the siphon systems. I can create feedback loops, safety lockouts. It'll buy you time." "They'll hurt you," Harry said. "Probably. I've earned it." Blackwood almost smiled. It was the saddest expression Wednesday had ever seen on a human face, and she had seen a great many sad expressions, usually because she'd caused them. "Go, now, before they breach the trapdoor." Wednesday didn't thank him. Thanking him would have been premature. He had 20 years of damage to account for, and a few minutes of late-breaking conscience didn't settle that ledger. But she met his eyes and gave him a nod, and in that nod was an acknowledgement that he had, in the end, made the right choice, and that she would remember it. Harry found the east wall panel and opened it. Beyond was a rough tunnel, hand-cut, recent, shored up with wooden beams. It connected to the catacomb network about 50 meters in, based on the air quality and the shift from new stone to old. They went through. The panel closed behind them, and above, the sound of the trapdoor being forced open echoed through the sub-basement, followed by voices, commands, the organized chaos of a strike team discovering that their objective had been sabotaged. Wednesday and Harry moved through the tunnel at speed. The catacomb connection opened up ahead of them, familiar territory, Wednesday's mapped corridors, her domain. She shifted the siphon core to her left hand and drew her blade with her right. She'd retrieved it before leaving the sub-basement, because Wednesday Addams did not leave weapons behind. "Where?" Harry asked. He was keeping pace beside her, his magic unfurled now, no longer compressed, lighting the tunnel in golden warmth. "The practice chamber. Deep enough to be defensible, large enough to fight in and outside the strike team's likely search pattern. They'll focus on the greenhouse sub-basement and the school buildings. The deep catacombs aren't on any official map. They're on yours. Everything is on mine." They reached the practice chamber, the same one where they'd fought the lithomorphs, the floor still glass smooth from Harry's transmutation. Wednesday set the siphon core on the stone ledge at the chamber's edge and turned to face the entrance. "They'll figure out we went underground eventually," she said. "Isald's combat specialists will have tracking capabilities. We have maybe 30 minutes before they locate us." "What do we do with 30 minutes?" Wednesday looked at the siphon core. It sat on the ledge, inert without the rest of the device, but still warm, still humming faintly. As long as it existed, Isald could rebuild. As long as it existed, the threat remained. "We destroy it," she said. "Permanently. But it was designed to channel our specific bond energy, which means conventional destruction might not work. If we smash it and it releases stored energy in our frequency, the bond could absorb it and amplify unpredictably. So we need to destroy it in a way that doesn't release the energy. We need to transform it." Wednesday looked at him. Harry looked at the core. His eyes narrowed with the particular focus of a man who had spent the last 3 days reshaping matter like clay and was thinking about doing it again. "I can transmute it," he said. "Change its fundamental structure. Turn the metal into something that can't hold magical charge. Lead, maybe, or carbon, something inert. Can you transmute an artifact designed to channel bond-specific energy without the bond interfering?" "Only one way to find out." He picked up the core. It pulsed in his hands, and Wednesday felt the bond react. A grasping, hungry sensation, the siphon core trying to activate, trying to draw on the energy it was designed to channel. Harry's jaw tightened. She could feel his magic pushing back against the core's pull, a contest of wills between a wizard and an artifact. "It's fighting me," he said through clenched teeth. Wednesday stepped closer, put her hand over his on the core. Physical contact through the bond amplified everything. She felt the core's hunger as if it were her own, the greedy pull of a device designed to eat exactly what they produced. And she felt something else. Underneath the hunger, a frequency. A specific, identifiable vibration that was the core's operational signature. "I can see its pattern," she said. Her psychic sight had activated, bond amplified, showing her the core's internal structure in shimmering detail. "It's a crystalline lattice, incredibly complex, but there's a resonance point, a single frequency that holds the lattice together. If you can hit that frequency with your transmutation, the whole structure collapses." "Show me." She pushed the image through the bond. Not words, not instructions, a direct psychic transmission, sending what she saw into his awareness. It was the most intimate thing they'd done, more intimate than the visions, more intimate than the emotional resonance. She was sharing her perception with him, letting him see through her eyes, and the bond roared with approval, flooding them both with a surge of synchronized power that was almost overwhelming. Harry saw what she saw, the lattice, the resonance point, and he hit it. His magic flowed through his hands into the core, targeted with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a wrecking ball. He didn't transmute blindly. He found the exact frequency Wednesday had shown him, matched it, and then inverted it. The crystalline lattice, suddenly vibrating against its own natural resonance, tore itself apart. The core went dark, the hum ceased, the warmth faded. In Harry's hands, the object that had been a masterwork of magical engineering became a lump of dull, gray, inert metal. Lead, dead, useless. He dropped it. It hit the floor with a flat, heavy thud. They stood in the chamber, hands still touching, breathing hard, the bond between them vibrating at a frequency neither of them had felt before. It wasn't the satisfied hum of cooperation. It wasn't the warm pulse of proximity. It was something deeper, something that had been activated by the psychic sharing, the direct mind-to-mind contact, and it felt like being known. Wednesday pulled her hand away. Her heart was hammering. The bond was doing something in her chest that she could not ignore and could not explain and could not dismiss as the artifact's influence because it was too deep, too real, too hers. Harry's eyes were bright. His breathing was uneven. He felt it too, she knew, because the bond was a two-way street and his emotions were bleeding through the connection with a rawness that told her he wasn't shielding, wasn't hiding, wasn't doing any of the 100 small acts of concealment that people perform to keep others from seeing them clearly. She saw him clearly, he saw her. "Wednesday," he said, and his voice was rough. "Don't," she said. "Not now, not here." "When?" "After." When people aren't trying to kidnap us and tear holes in reality. After, he nodded. But the bond held what they'd shared, held it like a cupped palm holding water, and neither of them could pretend it hadn't happened. A sound from the tunnel entrance. Footsteps. Multiple. The strike team had found the catacombs faster than Wednesday had predicted, which meant they had a tracker, someone with divination abilities or a magical GPS equivalent. 6 of them, Wednesday said, her psychic sense snapping into tactical mode with the relief of having something concrete to focus on. The other 6 are still in the greenhouse. These are the pursuit team, 6 trained combat specialists in a confined space. Harry rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck. His magic expanded outward, filling the chamber, and the glass-smooth floor reflected his power in shimmering waves. I've had worse odds. You've had worse odds alone. You're not alone. She said it simply, as a fact, as a tactical observation. But the bond heard the truth underneath, and it pulsed, and Harry felt it, and when he looked at her, his expression was not the face of a soldier preparing for battle. It was the face of someone who had been fighting alone for a very long time and had just been reminded that they didn't have to. No, he said, I'm not. The 6 combat specialists emerged from the tunnel in a 2x2 formation, wands up, ward shields active, moving with the terrifying efficiency of people who did violence for a living. They were young, late 20s mostly, and they wore the same charcoal tactical robes as Isald's aides. Their faces were blank with professional focus. The lead specialist saw Wednesday and Harry in the center of the chamber and barked a command in French. The formation shifted, 2 moving left, 2 right, 2 holding center. A flanking maneuver, textbook. Harry didn't wait for them to set up. He stamped his foot and the glass floor erupted, not randomly, surgically. The smooth surface that he'd transmuted 2 days ago responded to his will like an extension of his body, and 6 pillars of razor-sharp glass shot upward from the floor directly under the specialist's feet. Not to impale, to disrupt. The pillars threw the formation apart, sent bodies stumbling sideways, and in the half-second of disorientation that followed, Wednesday moved. She covered the distance to the nearest specialist in 3 strides. He was recovering, wand coming up, a shield charm forming on his lips, and she drove the pommel of her blade into his solar plexus with a force that emptied his lungs. He doubled over. She caught his wand arm, twisted, heard the wrist snap, and was past him before he hit the floor. Second specialist, the partner of the first, already redirecting, launching a binding curse at her. Wednesday dropped under it, the curse passing so close she felt the heat of it in her braids and came up inside the specialist's guard. Her blade sang. She cut the man's wand in half, then his belt, then the strap of the equipment pack on his back. Everything he was carrying hit the floor, and he stared at her in the half-second before she head-butted him, and he joined his gear on the ground. On the other side of the chamber, Harry was operating. 2 specialists had recovered and were casting in coordination, a smart move, combining their firepower, layering shields and attacks in an alternating pattern that would have pinned down most opponents. Harry wasn't most opponents. He caught the first curse with his bare hand, closed his fist around it. The curse, a stunner, red and bright, flickered and died in his palm like a candle being snuffed. The 2 specialists stared. Harry opened his hand and the absorbed energy flowed out, transmuted, no longer a stunner but a wave of concussive force that hit both specialists simultaneously and launched them backward into the chamber wall. They hit hard, slid down, didn't get up. The 5th specialist was the tracker. Wednesday could see the divination instrument strapped to his forearm, the tracking enchantments glowing in her psychic sight. He was hanging back, not fighting, trying to send a signal to the other 6. Wednesday threw her second mandrake flashbang. The sonic blast caught the tracker full in the face. His instruments shattered. His concentration dissolved. He dropped to his knees with his hands over his ears, and Wednesday was on him in a heartbeat, blade at his throat, her voice in his ear. "How many more are coming?" The tracker whimpered something in French. Wednesday's French was excellent. She'd learned it from Grandmere Addams, who had once seduced a French president and stolen his favorite painting in the same evening. 6 in the greenhouse. the tracker gasped. And Madame Vain, she's in the school, the main building. She want to find the principal. Wednesday released him and knocked him unconscious with a precise strike to the nerve cluster behind his ear. He dropped soundlessly. The sixth specialist was already down. Harry had dealt with him while Wednesday was interrogating the tracker. A single transmutation that had turned the floor under the man's feet into quicksand, then hardened it around his legs up to the waist. The specialist was stuck, unconscious from a follow-up sleep command, and wouldn't be going anywhere without a chisel. 6 down, 6 to go, plus Isald herself, who was apparently in the main building, which meant she was near the students, near Weems, near everything that mattered. Isald's in the school, Wednesday said. She went after Weems. Harry's expression darkened. Why Weems? Control. If she has the principal, she has institutional authority. She can lock down the campus, control communications, frame whatever happens next as an internal Nevermore matter outside ICW jurisdiction. We need to get up there. We need to get up there now. Wednesday surveyed the chamber. 6 unconscious combat specialists, 1 destroyed siphon core, the bond between them burning hot and bright with the energy of synchronized combat. Leave them. They won't wake for hours. They ran. Through the catacombs, up through the tunnels, out the entrance near the quad. The campus had woken up. It was past dawn now, the sky pearl gray, students visible through windows, the mundane morning routine of a school that didn't know it was under siege. Wednesday's phone buzzed. Enid. Bianca engaged strike team at greenhouse perimeter, holding them. But there's a woman in the main building, walked right in through the front gate like she owned the place. Weems let her in. What do we do? Wednesday texted back, nothing, we're coming. They hit the main building's front doors at a dead sprint. The entrance hall was empty, morning classes hadn't started, students were still in dining or dormitories. The sound of their footsteps echoed off marble and dark wood. Weems' office, 3rd floor. They took the stairs 3 at a time. The door was closed. Wednesday didn't knock. She never knocked. She kicked it open because her hands were full, blade in one, phone in the other, and the door banged against the wall with a sound that made everyone inside flinch. Isald Vain sat in the visitor's chair. She was immaculate, not a hair displaced, not a wrinkle in the dark green dress, as if she'd walked through a military operation without it touching her. Weems was behind her desk, and her face told a story of constrained fury and political helplessness that Wednesday recognized from decades of watching powerful women be outmaneuvered by people with fewer scruples. 2 of Isald's aides stood by the windows. Not the charcoal-robed combat specialists, these were political staff, but they were warded and armed, and they turned toward Wednesday and Harry with the practiced alertness of trained security. Miss Addams, Mr. Potter. Isald's voice was as controlled as ever. You look like you've been busy. 6 of your soldiers are unconscious in the catacombs, Wednesday said. Your siphon core is destroyed. Your focusing ring is rubble. And if the 6 specialists at the greenhouse haven't surrendered to my associates by now, they're having a very bad morning. Isald's composure held, but Wednesday, bond amplified, psychically enhanced, reading every micro-expression with the precision of a seismograph, saw the fractures, the tightening of the fingers on the armrest, the barely perceptible flare of the nostrils, the rapid reassessment happening behind those winter-blue eyes. You've been thorough, Isald said. I'm an Addams, thoroughness is genetic. And the siphon core, transmuted to lead, permanently. Your 20-year, 4 million galleon investment is currently a doorstop in a cave. The silence that followed was volcanic, calm on the surface, molten underneath. Isald's aides shifted. Weems gripped the edge of her desk. Isald stood, slowly, with the deliberate grace of someone who understood that the battle was lost but refused to cede the war. You think you've won, she said. I think I've neutralized the immediate threat. Winning requires a longer timeline, and I have the patience for it. Do you? Isald stepped toward them. Her aides moved with her, flanking. The siphon was one tool. The bond is the resource. As long as you two are bonded, you generate the energy I need. Another siphon can be built. Better crystals can be sourced. The wellspring will be opened, Miss Addams. If not today, then next month. If not next month, then next year. I've waited 20 years for this. I can wait longer. You can wait, Wednesday agreed. But you'll wait knowing that every move you make I'll see coming. My psychic range now covers the eastern seaboard. I will know when you mobilize. I will know when you fund. I will know when you breathe in our direction. And when I know, I'll act. Not defensively, preemptively. I will dismantle the pureblood reclamation circle one member at a time. I will expose every financial connection, every political favor, every dirty secret your old families have been hoarding for centuries. I will do it publicly, spectacularly, and with the theatrical flair that is my birthright as an Addams. She stepped forward, into Isald's space, close enough to see the individual ice crystals in those winter eyes. You studied us, you profiled us, you thought you knew what we were capable of, but your profile was based on us as individuals, and we're not individuals anymore. We're a bond, and the bond isn't a leash. It isn't a power source. It isn't a tool for you to use. It's a partnership between the most dangerous psychic in the Western Hemisphere and the most powerful wizard alive, and we have decided together that you don't get to win. Isald Vain looked at Wednesday Addams, then at Harry Potter, who stood behind Wednesday with his magic barely contained, and his green eyes burning with the steady, terrifying fire of someone who had destroyed a Dark Lord at 17 and had only gotten stronger since. Your countermeasures failed, Harry said quietly. Your soldiers failed. Your siphon is gone. Blackwood turned on you. He's probably already talking to Weems about everything. You have no institutional cover, no leverage, no backup plan that we can't see coming. The only thing you have left is the decision to walk away. And if I don't, Harry didn't answer with words. He let his magic answer. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. The windows frosted over. The magical lighting flickered and surged. The air itself became heavy with potential energy, with the promise of violence so vast and so controlled that it was more terrifying than any explosion could be. Isald Vain was many things: ruthless, brilliant, calculating, patient. She was not stupid. She looked at Harry Potter and she saw, with the clarity of a woman who had spent her life assessing threats, that this was not a threat she could overcome, outspend, outmaneuver, or outlast. She turned to her aides. "We're leaving." The aides moved to the door. Isald followed. She paused at the threshold, not for dramatic effect, but because she was Isald Vain and she would have the last word even in defeat. "The bond will keep growing," she said. "Blackwood was right about that, even if he was wrong about everything else. What you two are becoming, what the bond is making you, the world isn't ready for it. The old families aren't the only ones who will come for you. Governments will come. Institutions. Everyone who fears power they can't control, and they will never ever stop." "Good," Wednesday said. "I was getting bored." Isald left. The door closed. Weems sat in her chair and put her face in her hands. It was the most human Wednesday had ever seen her, and she gave the principal 10 seconds of privacy before speaking. "She won't stop," she said it herself. "I know." Weems raised her head. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "But you've bought us time, and Blackwood, he came to me 20 minutes ago, told me everything. The partnership, the funding, the siphon. He's willing to testify before the ICW. His testimony is useful but insufficient. We need the financial records. The Luxembourg Shell Company, the crystal suppliers, the quintessence gel synthesis lab. I can provide all of it." "How?" "I have my methods. The less you know, the better your plausible deniability." Weems looked at Wednesday for a long moment, then at Harry, then at their hands, because at some point during the confrontation with Isald, without either of them noticing, their hands had found each other and they were standing in Weems' office holding hands like the figures in Xavier's drawing, like the image from a prophecy they were writing themselves. Wednesday noticed. She didn't let go. "Get me the records," Weems said. "I'll handle the rest." They left the office. The hallway was empty. Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns on the floor, and Nevermore Academy was intact, unburned, standing, not because of institutional protection or political maneuvering, but because two people who hadn't chosen each other had chosen to fight together. Wednesday realized she was still holding Harry's hand. She let go, slowly. The bond hummed at the loss of contact, a gentle complaint, and she told it to be quiet. "We need to talk," she said. I know. About the bond, about what happened in the catacombs, the psychic sharing, the whatever that was. I know. Stop saying I know, it's not helpful. It's accurate. I know we need to talk. I know what we need to talk about. And I know that you'd rather face another 12 combat specialists than have this conversation. 14. I'd rather face 14. They walked to the tower. The campus was fully awake now, students streaming to classes, the ordinary machinery of academic life grinding on, unaware of how close it had come to grinding to a halt. A few students stared at Wednesday and Harry as they passed. Most didn't. The novelty was wearing off. They were becoming a fixture. Wednesday wasn't sure how she felt about being a fixture. The tower suite was quiet. Thing was on the mantelpiece, asleep, or performing his impression of sleep, which was indistinguishable from actual sleep except that he was a severed hand, and the biological requirements were unclear. Harry made coffee because of course he did, and Wednesday sat at the common room table and organized her thoughts the way she organized evidence, methodically, completely, without sentiment. Harry set a mug in front of her and sat across the table. The same positions they'd been in the first night when they'd negotiated terms for coexistence. 3 days ago, it felt like 3 years. The bond demands emotional resonance, Wednesday said. We've established that. It rewards authenticity and cooperation. It amplifies our abilities when we work together. And today in the catacombs, when I shared my psychic perception with you, it deepened. I felt it. What did you feel precisely? Harry wrapped his hands around his mug. He took a moment, and Wednesday appreciated the moment because it meant he was being precise rather than impulsive, and precision mattered. I felt you, he said. Not your thoughts, not your memories, you, the shape of your mind. The way you see the world, in patterns, in data, in connections that other people miss. I felt your anger, and it wasn't hot. It was cold, structured, like a weapon you'd built. I felt your fear, and I'm not afraid. You're afraid of the bond, not what it does, what it means. You're afraid that being known means being vulnerable, and you've built your entire identity around being invulnerable. The room was very quiet. That's not, Wednesday started. Wednesday, you told me the bond rewards authenticity. Be authentic. She stared at him. The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady and patient, and she felt the truth of what he'd said like a blade against her skin, precise, accurate, cutting exactly where it needed to cut. Yes, she said. I'm afraid of the bond, not the magic, not the proximity, not the fighting or the scheming or the enemies. I'm afraid that it's making me need someone, and I've never needed anyone, and I don't know how to need someone without it destroying who I am. The words came out raw, unedited, more honest than she'd been with anyone in her life, including herself. And the bond, the relentless, demanding, impossible bond, responded with such a surge of warmth that Wednesday felt tears prick her eyes, which was unacceptable, which was inadmissible, which was happening anyway. Harry set down his mug. He reached across the table. He didn't take her hand, he placed his hand on the table, palm up, open, an offer, not a demand. I spent my whole life being needed, he said, by the wizarding world. By my friends, by destiny. Everyone needed Harry Potter to be something, a hero, a symbol, a weapon. Nobody asked me what I needed. And then I came to Nevermore to disappear, and instead I got bonded to the most brilliant, terrifying, impossible person I've ever met, and the bond didn't ask me to be a hero. It asked me to be honest. And honestly, I don't know how to need someone either. I was raised by people who made it clear I wasn't worth needing. I learned to survive alone because the alternative was dying alone, and survival was marginally preferable. He took a breath. But the bond isn't making me need you. I needed you before the bond. You were the first person at this school who looked at me and didn't see the boy who lived. You saw a tactical asset with good coffee and soldier's instincts. You saw me. The bond just made it impossible to ignore. Wednesday looked at his open hand on the table. She looked at his face. She looked at the bond in her chest, burning steady, burning true, and she made a choice. Not because the bond demanded it, not because fate required it, not because ancient magic or celestial alignments or obsidian artifacts had predetermined it, because she chose it. She put her hand in his. The bond didn't explode. didn't surge, didn't do anything dramatic or magical or supernatural. It simply settled, like a key turning in a lock, like the last note of a chord resolving into harmony. The constant hum, the demanding pulse, the grasping hunger for emotional resonance, it all quieted into something warm and steady and permanent. Wednesday felt Harry's heartbeat in her palm, felt his relief, his wonder, his absolute bone-deep gratitude that she had chosen this, chosen him, chosen them. "For the record," she said, and her voice was steady even if her pulse wasn't, "this doesn't change my operational parameters. I still don't do small talk. I still don't smile on command. I still conduct experiments that produce smoke and screaming. I know, and I'm still investigating at least 3 crimes at any given time. I'd expect nothing less. And if you call me Mrs. Potter again, I will end you." Harry's hand tightened around hers, and he smiled, a real smile, full and unguarded, and it transformed his face from something haunted into something luminous. And Wednesday committed the image to memory because she committed everything important to memory, and this was, she was forced to admit, important. "Addams it is," he said. "Always." They sat at the table in their tower suite, holding hands, and outside the window Nevermore Academy went about its day, and the world kept turning, and somewhere Isald Vain was plotting her next move, and governments were worrying about things they couldn't control, and ancient forces were stirring in dimensions they couldn't see. But in that room, in that moment, there were just 2 people who had chosen each other, and the bond between them burned like a star.